Let us all remember that we are in the holy presence of God. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Let me be the change I want to see. To do with strength and wisdom all that needs to be done, and become the hope that I can be. Set me free from my fears and hesitations. Grant me courage and humility. Give me the spirit to face the challenge and start the change I long to see. Today I start the change I want to see. Even if I'm not the light, I can be the spark in faith, service and communion. Let us start the change we want to see, the change that begins in me. Today I start the change I want to see. Even if I'm not the light, I can be the spark in faith, service and communion. Let us start the change we want to see, the change that begins in me. Live Jesus in our hearts forever.
Our Lasallian prayer. I will continue, O my God, to do all my actions for the love of you. Saint John Baptist de La Salle, pray for us. Saint Benilde Romanson, pray for us. Live Jesus in our hearts forever. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. I am Alex from Best Buddies Benilde, and I will be your host for today. Once again, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon, and I would also like to give a special shout out to St. Teresa's College, Quezon City, Pamantasan ng Lungsod ng Muntinlupa, Philippine Women's University, Brighton School, University of the Philippines Los Baños, Divine Word College of Calapan, Polytechnic University of the Philippines, LaSalle Green Hills, De La Salle College of St. Benilde, Manila, and Antipolo, and to all educators, parents, and students present with us here. To start, I would like to introduce and welcome Miss Nerin Uy, President of Best Buddies Benilde. Let us all welcome Ner with a virtual round of applause.
Hi everyone, I'm Reen, the president of Best Buddies Benilde. Before I formally welcome you guys, I'd like to thank you first for allotting your time and joining and being here with us today. I'd like to thank also our speaker for accepting our invitation and will share his knowledge about the LGBTQIA community. This indeed is an exciting topic and a timely topic that I hope you guys can enjoy and learn from. It's time that all of us embrace diversity, correct our mistakes, and be stewards to create a safe space for our LGBTQIA community.
Thank you, Ms. Nair, for the welcoming message. To introduce our guest speaker, let me call Mr. Jeremiah Adriano, Inclusion Advocacy Unit Head of the Center for Inclusive Education. Let us give him a warm round of applause.
Thank you, Alex. Our guest speaker today is Mr. Gio Caliguia. Gregorio R. Caliguia III, or simply Gio, teaches history, Spanish language, and Philippine studies in the Polytechnic University of the Philippines. Gio received his Bachelor of Arts in History degree from PUP and his Master of Arts in Philippine Studies from the Asian Center of the University of the Philippines Diliman. His research touches the intersectionalities of historiography, art, and sexuality in the Philippine context. Gio is currently working on the historiography of the Philippine Queer Archive. Let us all welcome my dear friend, Gio.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, Sergio.
Okay, thank you so much. So let me share my slides in a bit. Okay. But before we begin, sorry, am I okay? So before we formally begin the session, um, let us dedicate a moment of silence, even just for a minute, because today is the third anniversary of the unexpected, of course, passing due to COVID-19 of our professor in the UP Asian Center, Professor Eileen Baviera. Uh, she's our professor in the Asian Center and also a great loss to the country because she's our foremost Chinese expert. Um, a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Okay. Thank you so much. Um, So as we will engage in this discussion, I also like to thank the College of Saint Benilde Center for Inclusive Education for inviting me again this year to talk about LGBT inclusion and safe spaces. So our topic is about safe space. But in general, the overarching title is Breaking Down the Walls or the Wall. And I named it as an ethnography of the queer archive or the Philippine queer archive because this is part of my uh, current research project, but this is more of a startup project that I am doing currently, um, where I'm trying to recuperate and to retract or to find materials that are relevant in reconstructing most of the silenced histories of the LGBT. But most challenging of this is on the side of the lesbians experience, the female at birth queer, and trans men histories. Those are the difficult parts. So I hope some of our participants today may find the lecture engaging, and we invite you to also partake in this kind of endeavor of recuperating histories, especially of those that had been uh, excluded in our narratives. So this is more of a gender and sexuality inclusion, uh, so to speak. So now, uh, the discussion uh, this afternoon will circle around these three main sections. So it's like framing the discussion uh, into the past, present, and future. So we'll start with a reflection, but this time it's more of the present context. And it will start from, of course, my personal reflection as a researcher, um, as an LGBTQIA plus person myself, and how this could have shaped this experience as an LGBT person myself could have shaped my perspective, my my ways of thinking and living as a specialist, as a researcher, investigating this particular area of knowledge and also of human experience. So from that level of reflection, we will move to the refractions in the past. So here we will try to showcase some of the narratives that we're able to find from the records. Most of these are part of the ongoing discussions, if not debates, among experts in the field of LGBTQIA studies. Most of the data that you will see are not originally uh, by my own work. So we will cite the scholarship and those pioneering experts who had paved the way for us to follow. But little by little, we'll try to uh, incorporate the updates that we will try to add into this conversation. And from that, we will move to the third part, which is more of a reflection again of how we can move forward from the current struggles that we have. How can we continue the fight for equality, especially that we commemorate also the Women's Month this March. But in a more inclusive sense, we want to also touch on the experiences of uh, queered, the othered genders and sexualities. So now, so since this is more of an ethnographic approach on the Philippine archive, so it's best to start with reflection, uh, my reflection as to my own experience as an LGBTQIA plus person. So when I was a kid, of course, it's part of most of us experience this that we're still trying to find our own identity. That there are some forms of thinking, desiring, loving that we couldn't understand because it is not what people would mostly expect from us. Like uh, in during my time when I was still a kid, of course, uh, the the setup of gender expectations are that if you're a boy, you're a male at birth, you're expected to assume masculine uh, projections. Like you'll play tough games like basketball or maybe some street games. And also for females, they're expected to do feminine deemed occupations or tasks, like embroidery in school or some cosmetology classes in high school. So when I was a kid, um I had this kind of experience, and this is actually more of a reflection which I did during my writing of my master's thesis years ago, uh, wherein I tried to do a sort of an archaeology of the self, where I'm trying to delve into my past experiences and try to inscribe it into my research process. That way, I can see or how much of my um, position as a researcher could affect my interpretation of the data. So by knowing this position as a researcher, I'm becoming more aware of what things I should avoid and able to maintain a degree of objectivity. But at the same time, I can make use of these experiences that I had to enable me to to empathize with the people that we study, because after all, history and cultural studies are human sciences. Okay, so I composed this poem as a form, a sort of a poem, no, but not in a really literary sense. No? This is harking back to my experience as a 10-year-old boy, with my family owning a little sari-sari store where we had consigned arcade, arcade stations. Like before the age of social media and Facebook and Twitter, kids before then would play on the streets, and then when you had the arcades, they would play and play and play with their every peso, especially during weekends. So the reflection of this experience goes like this. So in our Sari Sari store with two stationed arcades, thinks I was younger than 10, a Filipino British boy about my age visited his cousin, our playmate back then. The foreign lad, about my age also, awed us, little locals, the Pinoys. And so that day, he stood by at our arcade, watching gamers. To my delight, as a unaware gay kid, I flaunted my skillful command in speaking English. So skillful indeed, yet unintendedly, I sounded swishy. Unbeknownst to me, they found me sissy. The Brit kid couldn't help but ask, "Are you a bakla?" So that kind of accent. So of course, the weight of that word hurted me. And what follows is this. I ran inside the house out of shame into any room because as a kid, I didn't have my own room. I just hid from all their lads. And I stood there before a mirror and I rehearsed what I could have said back. So with these words, when I wrote this years ago, it reminded me of how powerless I felt. That amid this pressure amongst my peers, my supposed friends, and I think my tito or tita was also there at the store, or even my grandmother was there. They all laughed because of what that foreign lad said. Are you a bakla? And I think this experience, when I tried of recuperating it during my research process, in a hindsight, it allowed me to make sense of all the efforts that I did for how many years now as a researcher on the area of LGBTQIA. That most of our experiences as researchers are stemming from our personal struggles, which echoes the popular feminist saying that the personal is always political. And with the rest of the session, I want you to keep that in mind, that we need to be aware of the politics in the everyday context, that the little things that we do can affect other people's lives, not just at the personal level, but even at the political one. So since this session is more of uh, the dissection of the safe spaces, we'll move to that topic. So we have now a law, which is RA 11313, or the Safe Spaces Act. So this part of the session will be a little bit technical, but we'll try to use the layperson's terms. And in able to do that, we borrow the language from the Philippine Commission of Women in their website. They have this, so you can read the simpler explanation by the commission. But if you're into the nitty-gritty of the law, you can look for various law websites to further understand the provisions of the act. So now that we have this Safe Spaces Act, or Bawal Bastos Law, those that I have experienced as a child are supposedly bawal na, right? So if I felt powerless, this law is supposed to protect me. Uh, but of course, we need to be realistic that not all the times that the law that is enforced will always already be observed by the people, especially on the ground. So, of course, nowadays, there will still be experiences similar to what I have felt as a child, powerless, insulted, shamed before my supposed friends and relatives. So, uh, we'll try to dissect the facets of the safe spaces and what it tries to uphold. Okay. So, with safe spaces, with the language of space and safety, it tries to provide a healthy environment for everyone, regardless of our sexual orientation, of our gender identities, and different gender expressions, and of course, our sex characteristics or SOGSC. This is a very important concept to also mention, although this is not in the slides, but uh, to talk of the SOGSC is very important nowadays, especially we're living in a very complex society where our language needs to keep updated with the differing and different experiences of everyone. So sometimes you will meet people whose SOGSC are different with ours. So the Safe Spaces Act is in a way an instrument to maintain that healthy language, a healthy grammar uh, of gender and sexuality amongst ourselves. So when we talk about safe spaces, generally what we have in mind is the public space. So when we say the public space, it's literally the streets, the calzada, the vehicles, offices, schools, even the privately owned transportations like Grab. These are considered public spaces. So we need to respect these areas. Um, let's avoid using uh, gender insensitive language, and therefore we need to uphold a more gender fair language, especially with our fellow Filipinos. So this is not just amongst equals, but even those who are uh, in the service community, because sometimes there's this possibility that uh, customers may abuse drivers or those who are servicing us. So those are the forms of gender violations that this law is trying to to curtail, to put into stop. Okay, but aside from the street and public spaces, um, the law also covers educational spaces, training, seminar, workshop spaces, not just the formal institutions like colleges, universities, or even elementary and high schools, or even kindergarten. But all forms of learning institutions are considered part of the public space for as long as it is shared. Okay, and even the workplace, sexism, homophobia, transphobia exist, not just during interviews, but even during the actual work dynamics. Sometimes there will be, of course, in the Filipino culture, also yung chismis that, di ba, people are talking behind people's back. So, sometimes, nagiging form ng slur, nagiging form of insult, yung gender difference ng subject. Okay? Um, and then even online space, the virtual world, in this age of social media, it's also important to know that it is part of our public space. Although it's virtual, it's not physical, but it mirrors the physical world. So when we have conversations, especially private ones, diba? Especially amongst the teenagers and young adults, diba? There are now areas in the web, in the applications where the younger generation and even ourselves, no, who are young adults, are becoming more expressive in terms of not just gender but our sexual lives. Sometimes we have that kind of drive to exchange some sensitive content, and that is part of what this law covers. So Minsan when someone send you a photo that is also sexually sensitive, we're supposed to keep it private instead of sharing it. Um, so yun yung mga provisions itong law na yon. No? It tries to protect, no, yung mga pagkalat ng mga sexually explicit contents like scandals or yung mga screenshots, diba? So there are measures in the applications that are trying to protect yung spread ng ganitong forms of uh, violations. But minsan may mga instruments that can violate those protective measures. So, yun yung pinoprotection nitong law na yon. But of course, the law will not really take effect kung tayo mismo, the actors in society, will not understand the spirit of the law, yung principles behind this. That's why we're opening this kind of discourse for us to know na this kind of law exists and these kinds of ethical measures are being these measures have to be observed. Okay, so yeah. Now, in case that your sense of safe space have been violated, these are the various contacts that you can approach. Okay, in case that you need help in the public space. So in all cases, you can top the LGU, you can top the nearest police precinct, the social welfare and development offices, and even the public authority's office. Along the streets, local traffic enforcers are there to help us. Okay, in public utility vehicles, of course, the enforcers, and in malls, in bars, and even in LGU halls. So there are officers around that we can approach. And aside from this, siguro it's best to remind everyone that let's be also the guardians to each other. When we see a fellow person being abused in public space, let's speak up. Okay? And let's speak out against those who violate them. Okay? There are ways. For instance, halimbawa, nagko-commute, 'di ba? Ano to this had been discoursed even before. May mga magazine shows na fini-feature ganitong story. For instance, na females or women would experience sexual abuse in a jeepney, hihipuan ng katabi, or something more explicit, 'di ba? We can speak up as if kunyari kaibigan natin yung victim. Iyayain natin bumaba. Or sometimes pahiyain minsan yung violator, 'di ba? We need to soldier through and to brave ourselves kasi yung ganitong klase ng struggle ay nagpapatuloy even up to now, yung mga abuses. And hindi natin alam sino ang possible perpetrators. And we need to be equipped, okay, at all times. We need to know what to do. And we need to always speak truth, okay, to power. So, now ang madalas sa debate when we talk about safe spaces, so this is more of a larger socio-historical context ng safe space. Kasi in global discourses, especially in the US, for instance, they talked of this language of safe space as a merely cultural question. They're trying to not invalidate, but rather belittle, in a sense, the importance of this kind of issues. That they're saying, oh, it's a merely political, what do you call that? Political correctness. Okay, way back in the 90s, in the 70s, they have that language that they're trying to silence. They try to correct some practices that are deemed incorrect politically. So is it just a merely language issue? Why does it matter? So upon reflecting, I realized that our actions, okay, are always embedded in the back of our minds. It's the unconscious at play sometimes. In the study of gender, in the study of sexuality, we have this notion that the way we practice or the way we exercise our gendered and sexual lives every day is like enacting a social script. That script is already written even before we lived, and we're just performing it again and again. And this repeated performance of such uh, social script that governs our gendered and sexual lives become ossified as we practice it through and through, as if they become natural. So yung notion natin sometimes that uh, our sex differences or yung sexuality or gender are uh, derived from nature, doon nakaugat yon. Yung notion natin that babae at lalaki lang ang nilikha, let's say, or ang natural sexes because of the genitals, di ba? We're reducing our sense of humanity on those specific biological anatomical features. But the ongoing debate on sexuality and gender says that hindi lang tayo kung ano yung nasa pagitan ng ating mga hita o binte. We're more than that. And that's what we're trying to tease out, okay, in the conversations about gender and sexuality. So the unconscious is structured like language. Now, what do you mean by this? The way we act our gendered and sexual lives are like language. So we need to have a proper grammar to know uh, what's the uh, proper way of engaging with one another. Like language, grammar helps us to see the errors, and by errors we mean those instances that we violate other people's spaces. So when we have a shared language, a shared grammar, in terms of our genders and sexuality, we will further understand why some persons have different ways of expressing themselves, why some of our fellow Filipino LGBTQIA prefer certain ways of expressing their genders and even their sexualities over other forms of expressions and manifestations. So, kumbaga, yung ganitong mga training ay isang form ng pagkatuto ng ganitong klase ng grammar ng gender. So, speaking of grammar and language, ito yung ibang mga terms in the Safe Spaces Act na na-mention, no? Like, for instance, the term catcalling. It's like when you're whistling, di ba, sa isang dalaga na naglalakad, di ba? Uso ito sa masa, sa mga ordinaryong Pilipino, no? Sa street language, no? Parang bahagi na siya ng everyday context. When you're there, nandun ka sa konteksto na yon, you'll see this kind of practice as normal lang yon, usual lang yan. So dapat hindi ka ma-offend, right? Pero what we're doing now is we're teasing out yung imbalance. Diba? When we catcall another person, diba? We're trying to reduce them into an object of sexual desire, a mere object. Okay? So, nililesen natin yung value nila as a person when we catcall them. Diba? So, maraming intersecting issues when we talk about catcalling. One is sexism. So, sexism is a category that was invented during the second wave feminism of 50s, 60s. And basically, it talks about the issues of inequality based on the binary framework of sex. So binary, two sides. So you have man, woman. No? Yun yung, in the language of cis man and cis woman. Because before, malakas yung discrimination against cis women at work, at education. No? So aside from that, catcalling can also be part of homophobia. No? So tinatawag natin, like what my experience in the first part of this discussion, di ba? We mentioned na I experienced being called bakla and the weight of that word, di ba? ay napakabigat. For someone who knows the meaning of the term bakla, napaka-offensive. It's like being called faggot in English or queer. But now in the Anglophone discourse, they're appropriating, they're reshaping the language queer and or the term queer, and so they're trying to own it and make use of it as a tool for liberation. And that's also part of our goal, to own the word bakla, and to make it our own tool to rework our ways of thinking in gender and sexuality. So aside from the homophobia, we have the transphobia. So somehow these are connected. So mainit yung discourse about the trans rights, trans women, trans men. And even inside or within the LGBT gender sexuality uh discourses or yung movement, if we can call it a movement already, no, we're going there, okay? Uh, may mga discrimination pa rin sa trans community. And minsan may mga wings of feminism kasi maraming forms of feminism uh, which are exclusivist. They exclude the trans in their discourses, no? So yung tinatawag na trans-exclusive radical feminism, for instance, nagiging form na rin siya ng slur, no, sa loob ng gender discourse. So yung mga ganong dynamics, we need to also be sensitive of that. No, na baka tayo rin mismo as gender advocates, baka tayo din pala yung nagko-commit minsan ng discrimination. And then we have misogyny, no, and misandry. So misogyny is the illogical, irrational hatred against women. Diba? So may mga ganoong ways of thinking, no, before na nagre-result din minsan sa physical violence, sexual violence, 'di ba? Or even yung yung language is discriminating against women, 'di ba? Yung pagbubugbog ng mga misis, 'di ba? Or yung pang-aabuso, 'di ba? When I was doing my archival research for my master's thesis, in the 50s matunog itong mga ganito. This was post war, no? Yung mga pag uphold ng karapatan ng kababaihan, ng mga kabataan, no? Medyo siya, no, nag-heighten yung mga cases ng abuse after the war, no? And even some films, no, may mga ganoon din sila mga theme minsan na may mga gender sensitive na mga topics, like may mga naabuso at some parts of the film. Kumbaga, nagiging part siya ng discourse of the post-war Philippines 40s, 50s, and yung media at the time, yung film, ay nagiging way to raise awareness and in order to protect ourselves against this type of abuses. And luckily now that we have these kinds of laws, no, we have more gender fair language, we have a more gender fair perspective, mas naiintindihan natin yung forms of violation sometimes, no. Misandry, when we express hatred against men naman. Kasi merong mga kaso halimbawa that we express hatred sa yung male bashing kung tatawagin. Pag masobra naman tayo masyado, parang na-exclude naman natin yung mga kalalakihan. So we need to also highlight or to clarify that when we talk about feminism, when we talk about gender, it's not men against women or women over men. We're trying to create an equal and inclusive environment for everyone. No? Ang kalaban, hindi lalaki, kundi hindi yung patriarchy that privileges men. Yun yung gusto natin i-clarify. Okay? And then aside from catcalling, we have issues nga ng harassments then online, like cyberstalking. We need to be aware of that. Sometimes yung mga pangungulit natin sa chats, minsan nagiging form na rin siya ng abuse. So kailangan maging aware tayo dyan. Panangungulit tayo with people na medyo nagtatry ng dumistan sa atin. 'Di ba? Let's not insist kasi they also have the right for their own spaces even in the online space, no? Catfishing, naging maingay din itong category even years ago, no, na newly coined itong term na ito that you are using another person's profile photo, you're inventing or fictionalizing an image or a profile online which is really not you. 'Di ba? Namimeke ka to lure para makaakit or magkagusto sa yung tao na gusto mo din. Sometimes nagkakaroon ng ganitong um, forms of violation. So we understand that siguro it's stemming from the frustration of the person, coming from insecurities siguro that na kailangan din siyang iayusin, 'di ba? So that kailangan yung tutukan. Pero yung i-open ito sa yung pag-open ng ganitong topic in this discussion, 'di ba? Parang ginagawa natin ito to raise awareness that this kind of violation exists. No? And sometimes baka hindi tayo aware, no, na yung profiles natin pala ay nagagamit na ng iba online, 'di ba? Rights are also being violated kapag nangyayari sa atin 'to, no? And gaya na mention ko kanina, we ought not to share privately sent messages or contents, especially sexually explicit ones, no, without the consent of those who sent these images or content to us in the first place. So yon, yung mga ganyang bagay. And cis heteronormativity, we just want to clarify the category na, di ba, I mentioned the word patriarchy. Di ba, ngayon sa language and gender, we use the term cis heteronormativity to name yung medyo systemic form of abuse, no, na hindi lang siya nakaangkla sa sexism or homophobia alone or transphobia alone or misogyny or misandry, pero it cuts across these different streams of struggles. When we say cisgender, parang it talks about yung males and females at birth who are comfortable with these sex or sex characteristics assigned to them, no? Kung komportable sila na sila lalaki, komportable sila ay babae, no? So yun yung cisgender. And when we say heteronormative, we assume that heteronormativity or heterosexuality is the norm, no? And when we put them together, we assume na lahat ng tao are innately born straight, quote unquote straight, 'di ba? Parang yun yung nagiging part din ng inside joke minsan sa LGBT na bakit yung mga straights hindi nila kailangan mag-come out. Hindi sila tinatanong na kailan mo na-discover that you're straight, 'di ba? You don't have that kind of struggle unlike most of the queer persons, no, LGBT persons, no? Na talagang yung iba dumadaan din sa abuse from the supposedly safe space of home. 'Di ba? Minsan yung mga magulang yung kukomit pa ng pang-aabuso kasi they thought na pag physical abuse mo yung bata ay mako-correct mo kasi it's just a phase, 'di ba? Yun yung prevailing thought even before ang assumption is that ang pagiging bakla, pagiging lesbian, ang pagiging pagkakaroon ng trans identification, pagiging queer, pagiging bisexual ay ano lang, yugto lang ito, malalagpasan yan, mako-correct yan, di ba? Now we have a better language, we have better frameworks of thinking, and we know that it's not the case. Gender and sexuality are fluid, di ba? Sometimes may mga tao na for the longest time they believe that they're straight, and then in the latter part of their lifetime they'd realize hindi pala, that I'm more comfortable with engaging with having a romantic relationship with a person of the same sex, may mga ganon, no? And that's part of the human nature. It's part of our complexities as a human species. So yung ganitong awareness kailangan dala natin yan. So like our message in the previous session dito din sa CIE, no, ng Benilde, we mentioned na to create safe space, it's a matter of perspective. Kaya nga may mga ganito mga seminars and webinars is because we want to raise awareness, we want to have a perspective, and we want to change the way we see the world and to be the safe space for each other, di ba? Sa kapwa natin tao, kapwa Pilipino, LGBT man o hindi, no? Cis or trans, non-binary or queer, di ba? Respetuhin ang bawat isa, di ba? Kailangan natin balikwasin yung mga makaluma na nating pananaw which are no longer proven to be accurate in terms of explaining and expressing our diversity in gender and sexual facets. No? So, okay, sorry, that's just the first part. No? Now, in the second part, no, medyo from a more present day context, babalik tayo sa nakaraan, but still it's connected with with the present kasi the way we will look into these historical vignettes is that we will try to look at them from a point of view of an ethnographer, a researcher, no, as myself, no, na tumitingin sa ganitong datos. How does this kind of research area help in how does this kind of research area help us in elucidating some unclear areas of our thinking today? That's why I named this part refractions kasi basag-basag sila, but in a way when we put these puzzles from different time periods and from different contexts and cultures, diba, we will see a more inclusive narrative, especially for those who were long been excluded in the story of the Filipino. So, refractions, no? Madalas when we study the LGBT, no, bumabalik sa image of the babaylan. So we have here an image from Gromicon, no, ng babaylan, no? And then the larger one from Carlos Botong Francisco, which is intended to be displayed in PGH, but now this is in the curatorship of the National Museum. Ano yan 4 panels depicting the evolution or the development of medicine. So in pre-colonial times, the babaylan or the shaman priestesses, kung sabihin, they are the guardians of the folk wisdom. They are the philosophers, they are the healers, they are the doctors, they're also the historians, they're also the teachers of the community. And there are records na there are records about the babaylan, a form of babaylan that are not females, meaning hindi sila biologically female or biologically woman, no? Pero sila ay males at birth, no? Male genitalia meron sila, but they self-identify as women. They dress and they act as women. At ang tawag sa kanila sa kasaysayan ay mga bayogin sa Tagalog, no? Asog sa Kabisayaan. Some areas in Mindanao, they're called Labia, no? In the 19th century, 20th century, Bido ang tawag sa kanila. But we need to clarify that this is still an ongoing debate kung representative ba talaga ang babaylan ng pagkabinabae. But we need to clarify that hindi sila synonymous. Okay? So when you see babaylan, it is an office, it is an occupation. No? Ito yung pagiging priestess, di ba? Regardless kung cis woman or trans woman, for as long as you are identifying with the femininity, di ba? Ikaw ay pwedeng maging babaylan. At saka yung mga males at birth na kailangang maging babaylan, they have to transform themselves to become woman. No, yun yung mindset noong pre-colonial era. No, but it's incorrect to say or to equate na ang bayogin ay babaylan. No, may distinctions yon. No, bayogin is a form of being a babaylan, but the records are quite conflicted kung lower ranked ba ang Bayogin, because there are claims saying that the Bayogin is a lower ranked priestess at the time, no? But for instance, yung Boxer Codex, no, in 1590, sila sabi niya lower rank ang Bayogin, but in the end of that section, sasabihin niya na mas convincing, mas influential ang mga Bayogin or yung males at birth na na effeminate, cross-dressing, yun yung description sa archive no? Mas convincing daw sila kasi mas pompous, mas celebratory yung kanilang pagpe-perform ng rituals. No? So even the sources are conflicted. No? So yung Payogin, Binabaye, Asog, Labia, I mentioned that in the earlier times during the pre and early colonial and even in the 19th century Spanish Philippines, lumalabas yung category ng lalakinin. No? In Spanish, they call it marimacho. Combination ng mujer siguro ito and o maricon. Siguro inappropriate siya. Maricon is a parang equivalent ng bakla. Insulto din yon, no? And macho, which is basically street stud, no? Yung astig-astig sa kalye, no? Yun yung ano, no, yung mga babae na kung umasta at kumilos ay parang lalaki. Yun yung term nila, marimacho o lalakinin. However, in the records, it was not really clear if these lalakinin, yung paggamit ng term na lalakinin, ay tumutukoy doon sa mga taong nagsiself-identify as what we may consider today as lesbians or as what we may consider today as trans men. No? So hindi klaro sa record kasi we need to understand that these documents are recorded by those who are privileged to document them. So hindi natin naririnig yung actual voices, yung actual agency ng mga recorded marginalized sa society, no? Yung mga Bayogin, Binabaye, Asog, Labia, or lalakinin, no? That's the difficult part when we go along the grain of the archive, no? We cannot really tease these stories out. What we can only do is to infer, but this has to be done carefully, no? Maingat yung pagbabasa ng records dapat. So you need to weigh, you need to oscillate, no, yung interpretation. But moving to the 1960s, kasi nagkaroon ng ethnographic work si Schlegel, isang American anthropologist, way back in the 60s at the Durais, no, sa Southern Philippines. And sinulat niya yung kanyang libro na published in the 90s, no. Meron siya dong chapter exploring and dissecting the story of Uka. So si Uka ay isang zither player. Nagtutugtog siya ng string instrument. At siya ay isang trans woman, kung i-equate natin today. But the community called her Mentifuwalay Libon. No? If you are a self-identifying person as a woman, no? Libon. Lagay. I'm not sure if my pronunciation is correct. No? Kung ikaw naman ay female at birth and you self-identify as a man, no? Mentifuwalay lagay ang tawag, no? So during the ethnography of Schlegel, this intrigued me, and of course other scholars also, that he asked the community, si Schlegel, the foreign American Western anthropologist, no, the inquirer, outsider sa community. So si Uka ay isang lalaki na naging babae. So Uka is a man who became a woman. That's the language of Schlegel, which assumes na mayroong sphere of manhood, ta-transport, ta-transfer, ta-transition, no, to womanhood. May change, may shift from being a man to a woman. Yun yung language of thinking, yun yung grammar of thinking ni Schlegel, the anthropologist. Now, the community corrected him. Ang sabi, in our understanding, that the Duray understanding, Uka is not a man. Uka is not a male. Uka is not a boy. But Uka is a person who became woman. So yun yung language nila, no? Hindi nila agad ini-impose sa isang tao yung gender or sexual marking. The affirmation of one's sexuality or one's gender comes from the very person mismo, from uka. So kung ang manifestation ni uka ng kanyang gender, ng kanyang sexual life ay femininely, the community acknowledges that regardless what's between her legs, regardless of her genitalia. So ang naging reflection dito ni Schlegel later on, decades after nitong ma-witness from the field, sabi niya, ang Teduray community is way ahead in terms of thinking compare sa kanilang supposedly progressive countries from the West. No? So yung thinking ng 50s and 60s, atrasado compare sa thinking ng community ng Metifuwalay, ng mga Teduray about the Metifuwalay. No, yun yung lessons, no, na nakikita natin from ethnographic accounts from the archival data. Why this matter? Ang pinapakita sa atin nito in our communities, in our cultural communities, in our cultural groups, no? Hindi na sila tinatawag na indigenous groups, no? According to some of our friends who are working in the cultural agencies, no? Pinapakita nito na the way Filipinos, the early Filipinos, and even our cultural communities like the Tedurais, no, view the LGBT, what we may call now as LGBT, they're more inclusive than us. Diba? So that's a form of lesson that we can borrow from them. Yung inclusivity ng ating mga ninuno at yung inclusivity ng ating mga kapwa Pilipino whose cultural identity ay malapit doon sa sinauna pa nating kaayusan at pagkakakilanlan, no? So it's something to celebrate, no? And to emulate also. So another reflection naman, so around 60 si Uka, di ba? So let's a bit of 10 years before that, mga 50s, no, 1950s. This is a reflection naman from or an opinion piece sa Philippine Review, no. I found this during my archival work sa UP Main Library na nagkakalkal ka doon ng mga microfilm kasi wala na yung actual na papers, no. And I found this interesting piece, no, na isang komentaryo by Remy Bullo, no. She's talking about yung gendered practices ng mga lalaki, ng mga babae, especially the younger generation at the time, no, na meron siya to description na yung mga lalaki daw ay parang mga nagho-holding hands sa kalsada, na mas maingay pa daw ang mga lalaki compared sa mga babae, para daw sila mga schoolgirls, no? Observe the language, di ba? Observe the language. Yan, no? Na sinasabi niya na mag-holding hands daw ang mga lalaki on the streets, no? Parang husband's lover, yung vibe. And then pag napansin or sinita, maglalayo, and then maghihintay lang minuto, mag-holding hands na naman daw ulit. It provides us two insights, actually. So number one is that way back in the 50s, yung matuturing natin ngayon na against the heteronormativity na nag-holding hands yung mga lalaki, it was ngayon parang, ano ba yan, nag-holding hands sila, bading, quote-unquote, di ba? Parang ganyan, BL, di ba? Pero way back then, di ba, walang mali siya noon, no? It's a form of friendship, di ba? Before, no? Or we do not know, no? Kung ano yung namamagitan sa kanila. Pero walang mali siya amongst them, amongst males at birth, di ba? So, yun yung unang insight. But another insight from this is that as early as the 50s, di ba, may ganito ng mga judgments, di ba? Hinuhusgahan na yung medyo odd, medyo queerly, medyo kakaibang gendered ways of acting in space, in public space, no? And luckily now we have awareness about gender sensitivity, about safe spaces, hindi ba? Na way back before na parang privilege pa ang tao na naglalambas or nag-a-attack sa mga ganitong mga bagay, di ba? And now publish pa, di ba? But decades before 50s, these images are not mine, but from other scholars, no? John Silva, from the Ortigas Library, no? I'm not sure if Sir Silva is still the director of the library, and Professor J. Neil Garcia of UP our pioneering scholar ng LGBT historical studies, no? Siya yung nag-publish talaga ng monumental na libro, Philippine Gay Culture. So, yung first two images on the left, no, yung mga guys, no, this is from the Book of Silva. Ang label niya dito is a expression of male friendship eh. Ang sinasabi ni Silva in his book, ng collection ng or curated collection of images expressing male to male friendship, is that it's hard to really affirm na merong namamagitan romantic or sexual relations between these people. But all we can do is to infer, diba? But the way they project themselves, diba, yung medyo malilikot nating imagination today, 'di ba? May anachronistically violation ito sa history, may anachronistically read this material as queerly. Kasi makikita natin in the first photo from Silva's book na halos magkadikit itong dalawa, 'di ba? And yung isa is like saling kit-kit dito sa image, 'di ba? So iba yung grasp nung guy on the side, 'di ba? And also in this photo, 'di ba? But the challenge for us scholars of gender and sexuality is that we need to provide more substantiations kung talaga bang may romansa or romantic affair between these guys, no? Pero ang kaya lang natin ma-offer is what we call the queer reading, yung kine-queer natin yung ganitong mga artifacts from the past. And when we say we queer things, no, just to clarify the category, when we say queer, we are disturbing the norm. We don't necessarily mean na kapag kinweer natin ng isang bagay or tinignan natin siya as a queer phenomenon ay bakla na siya agad or lesbian na siya agad or ipinapako natin at certain identity markers, no, yun yung binabasag ng queer reading, no. Bakit hindi natin tignan even straights, so-called straight people, no, yung cis man, cis woman, even the cis generation, no, some of their actions pwede mo ring tignan as queerly, di ba? May mga ganong reading, no. So this is an invitation for us to look into not just historical but even the contemporary cultural productions, no, yung mga palabas sa television, yung K-drama for instance or yung mga shows online, right? Minsan may mga queerly doon, no? But we need to be aware if totoo bang nire-represent niya yung LGBT community or this is what they call queer baiting or parang hinuhook lang nila yung audience for marketing purposes, no? So may mga ganong dynamic na may economic lens. And then we have the third photo here of Lolo Pulong or Crispo Luna, no, from the work of Janil Garcia, no. So this is a very important recuperative archival work na ginawa ni Janil, no, on bringing back to our consciousness yung storya ni Pulong, no. So si Pulong ay pre-World War II, itong image na ito, no. Pinapakita sa atin ng image na at certain point in history, may mga pagkakataon that queerly practices such as this, pagdadamit babae, pag enact and pagkilos, no, yung pagiging totoo sa sarili ay nabibigyan ng espasyo before, no. So yun yung isang message ng ganitong mga artifacts from the past. But we need to also remind ourselves na of the bigger picture. Baka naman din kasi these kinds of spaces that they had where they can express their uh, non-normative gendered expressions, no, ay limitado lang din, no? Sometimes pwede lang sila magdamit babae beyond the gaze of their parents, of the public, in a very private space, let's say photographic studio, 'di ba, magpapa-picture, no, and then itatabi niya lang yung photo or yung image every time that Lolo Pulong would like to imagine herself as a woman, no? May mga ganong instances. Or minsan itinatago sa gabi, inilalabas yung kanilang pag-express of what they truly are in terms of their genders, no? So, kumbaga nasisikil yung kanilang espasyo to realize, no, yung kanilang um, self-identity. And these things, no, we're looking back into these things to make ourselves aware today na yung mga taken for granted liberties natin ngayon, di ba? Ay inilaban ng mga tao kagaya nila na nauna sa atin. And we need to pay homage to the struggles of those who led before us. Gaya nila Pulong, gaya ng mga nasa larawan na ito, which are unsung heroes of our history. So, in my own work, in my master's thesis, ito yung aking nakalkal, no? So, because my thesis really explores the etymology, the history of the category bakla, na napaka-offensive na kategorya along the grain of the archive. Yun yung ginawa ko eh. I revisited the category and tinignan ko yung paano ba gumagalaw, nagpo-progress through history yung word, no? In terms of becoming a gendered category. No, as early as the 1930s, kasi this work is published in the 30s, yung Recollection of a Tondo Childhood by no other than Benvenido and Santos, no? The LaSalle named its center for creative writing kay Benvenido Santos, no? One of our excellent Filipino-American scholar din, no? So dito sa text na to, this is actually when I investigated it. Ito yung naging kumbaga cornerstone ng aking historical research eh. Nakita ko na this is a mix of facts and fiction or fictionalized facts, no, so to say, no? Kasi may mga parts of the story that do not corroborate well doon sa actual biography ng author, which is Benvenido and Santos, and supposedly the tone of the text is autobiographical, no? Kasi as young as 13 or 15, if I'm not mistaken, si Santos ay orphaned na, no? Pero dito sa story, sa dulo on a second page, pero hindi ko na na-include sa slides, may recollection si Santos, one dinner night na naghahapunan sila ng kanyang magulang na at the time na supposedly nasa college level na siya, no? Pero yun nga, um, ilang taon yun, no? Mga approaching 20. Pero kung orphan na siya in his 20s, hindi niya na makakasama sa hapunan yung kanyang parents, no? So may mga ganong elements sa story. But what's important is this, no? Yung story nito predates, yung content nitong yung document predates what the current scholarship believes to be the earliest usage of the word bakla as a gendered category. Kasi according to the prevailing debates in the scholarship, 1950s or 60s ginamit ang bakla, ang word na bakla, to signal gender signification and stigma. No, yung bakla, as in babae, no, was a 60s thing, no. Pero this document, di ba, it gives us this recollection, no. Allow me to read it for you, no. So another boy lived just in front of our house, no, with across the callejon in a light with the electric lights, no. Pero itong author, no, they use a kerosene lamp, no. But unlike, look at the language. I want you to observe the language, the grammar. Unlike the rest of us, so may othering, he always wore regular pants, and sometimes he would come out and play very clean and with powder all over his face. He looked like a girl to us, and in fact, he often played with the girls, especially with the little mestiza girl with the bobbed hair who spoke Spanish. Oding was her name. And na corroborate nung kanyang biography, kanyang memoir na Oning exists as a real person, no? Na childhood crush ito ni Benvenido and Santos. And then shifting back to the boy, yung another boy na lagi daw nakapulbo, para siguro bini-baby powder lagi, laging malinis, mukhang babae. We called him Bakla. He hated the nickname very much. And his real name was Yoyong. This struck me. Nakakagulat nung nakita ko to. And it was around 2015 when I was taking a course on languages and cultures. Kaklase ko dun si Jemay kanina, the one who introduced me, my fellow friend. We took it under the late Professor Dr. Ruben Cañete, an excellent Filipinist, gender scholar then, an art historian. Nung nakita ko to, I know that the potential of the text, and that's why I turned this into my master's thesis, that this can challenge the prevailing interpretation on the etymology of bakla. And dito, along the way ko, ng pag-aaral ko, along the grain and along the way of my master's project, no, doon ko nakita yung politics and ethics of doing an ethnographic work in the archives. That we need to be careful with our categories, with the names, with the labels. We need to be sensitive with the differences of the people, both that contemporaneous with us, yung mga buhay pa katulad natin, bawat isa sa atin, and those who lived before us. Kahit pa nasa ibang century sila, ibang culture sila, we need to respect pa rin yung kanilang soji, yung kanilang differences. So let's not impose yung ating present day categories sa kanila. But the thing is we have a much healthier and a much gender sensible language, gender fair language. Pero what struck me, I want to share kasi nga ethnographic ito, no, from a reflexive perspective. Nakakagulat lang din, no. I don't know kung merong mga astrological alignments with this one, though I'm not a fan of astrology. Si Yoyong, when I look at the records, no, sino si Yoyong? I was struck that the name Yoyong is actually a nickname for Gregorio. And it so happened, my name, right, is also Gregorio. So parang, wait, ano ba to? Parang nag-a-align ba yung mga kometa, mga bituin, no? But no. Kaya lang, the problem is, in the memoir of Benilde and Santos, hindi niya na-mention si Yoyong. Which also one of my problems when I was doing my research. Paano ko matitrace itong actual Yoyong na to kung historically existing ba talaga itong pinangalanan nilang bakla? But it so happens that in his memoir, may pinangalanan pa siyang isang Yoyong. No? Pero yung Yoyong na yun ay anak ng kapatid niya, yung kanyang kuya. No? Gregorio Sr. yung kapatid niya, and Gregorio Jr. aka Yoyong yung kanyang pamangkin, anak nun. And at that time, based sa memoir, no, memories fiction ni Benilde and Santos, magkaedad lang sila nung anak ng kanyang kuya. So one of the inferences or assumptions ng aking research is that baka naman si Yoyong na tinawag nilang bakla ay pinsan niya. Possible 'yon, no? So ang daming mga parallelisms sa itong archival source na to, which made me finish my master's, no? Sa naging reflection ko kanina, 'di ba? The same person whose name is Gregorio in the past, 'di ba, was being taunted, being teased as bakla. And this person could have felt also powerless. But the thing is, we do not know how he spoke back, what he could have said back. Hindi natin malalaman na yon because it's not recorded. Yun yung problema sa history, eh. Diba? But just to continue the story nito ni Yoyong, no? At the end of this short story, yung Recollections of a Tondo Childhood, ang nakasulat doon sa narrative ni Benvenido is that when they grew up, nakatapos ng kolehiyo si Yoyong. At that time, itong perspective nitong narrator, hindi siya nakatapos. So, I'm still working that out kung talaga bang si Benvenido ito, no? Nakatapos ng college si Yoyong. But the degree that he got is in engineering. And if we look at the records like sa study ni Dr. Caroline Sobrichea ng American Colonial Education System, ang engineering ay until now naman din, pero before was really a male-dominated degree and business or enterprise or occupation. Puro lalaki, 99.9% ang kumukuha nun ay mga lalaki. You would not expect a female at birth taking that course, no? So, or program, no? So, one of my queer readings dito sa document na ito, no, in one of the chapters of my thesis is that baka naman doon bumawi si Yoyong, reclaiming his space, no, na nag-take siya ng degree na aligned doon sa masculine or deemed as masculine occupation. Parang to reaffirm his manhood, no, ay doon niya i-channel yung kanyang struggle. But this is just parang queer rereading na lang siya. Hindi na ito based sa corroboration ng mga actual documents kasi nga it's hard to prove if this Yoyong is really a historical person who lived at the time. It's still part of our ongoing project, this ethnographic project along the grain of the Philippine Queer Archive. No, so ayun siya. No, now, so for the last part, this is more of a conclusion, no, yung reflections anew, no? Kumbaga, after natin mag-reflect kanina on our own struggles and then we move back to the past, we look back into what we're doing along the grain, no? Dapat tanong tayo, what do we mean exactly when we talk about walls in this session? Which wall anyway should we break? Diba? So, ergo which wall? Diba? Anong pader ang pinag-uusapan natin? Diba? So, this is more of an ethnographic question. So, I'm asking from a point of view of an ethnographer. No? Yung ethnographer's eye, which in a more linguistic game, kung tutusin, or language game, that I can mean I myself or the I perspective. Nilalaro yung language, no? And so, by taking this reflexive mode, I'm asking this question to unpack it further this way. So, is the wall always this brick covered or brick-like, big, bold, well-buttressed wall? Lagi bang ganyan ang forma ng wall? Or may iba't iba bang shape itong wall na ito? Iba't ibang forms? Diba? We need to know the dynamics of the wall. Is it always stable? Is it always already there? Are there spaces of cracks, of crevices, no? Na pwede nating pagsimulan ng effort to break it. Meron bang ganon? No? And by asking these kinds of questions, it allows us to think otherwise. Panse otraman, no? And I think hindi laging stable, hindi laging bricks, hindi laging well-buttressed or well-supported yung mga pader. Diba? In my case, the form this wall assumed is that of my insecurities as child. Diba? May iba-iba tayong struggles eh. And I use the metaphor of the mirror to talk about this. Because when you look at the mirror, you see yourself as you. And it allows you to reflect, to look back, to gaze beyond while looking at the self. Yung power ng mirror, yung metaphor ng mirror. And remember earlier, nung binabasa ko yung poem, way back in my childhood, di ba? Reflection about my childhood. I asked myself, di ba, of what I could have said back in front of the mirror, and I was rehearsing. Dapat ganito ang sinabi mo. Dapat ganito ang ginawa mo when you were there, when they were attacking you, when they were taunting you, when they were insulting you. Are you a bakla and they're laughing before you? Dapat ganito ang ginawa mo. But the thing is, hindi ko na yung mababalikan. Time flies, di ba? Tempus edax rerum. So, what can I do now? Di ba? What can I do now? Etong ganitong experiences, they're like specters haunting me. And I'm sure there are others out there amongst the audience or even our friends in our community, in our families, who are undergoing this kind of haunting, 'di ba, ng kanilang frustrations. Sana ganito ginawa ko. Sana I acted on when I was being uh, attacked, violated, abused, insulted, or shamed. Pero hindi eh, di ba? So, anong pwede natin gawin? Kasi hindi natin babalikan, di ba? Now, I will offer 3 takeaways. Number 1, okay, does it move? Okay, we need to know our walls. By this, I mean, kailangan natin bumalik sa sarili. What I said earlier, an archaeology of the self. As a researcher, as an LGBT person myself, I reflected and I tried to look at the forms of discrimination and abuses that shape me as a person, and those same forces that shape me. Conversely, I want to talk back to them, to break them down. And able to do that, we need to know them. One way to know them: study, research, read debates, discussions on inclusivity in terms of gender and sexuality. That helps. But uh, in the most part, it's really about reflecting with our own struggles. Minsan kasi mas malapit ito talaga sa personal na espasyo, diba? As an academic, I always try to be objective, but at the end of the day, tagos talaga siya sa personal na danas, personal na pakikibaka. So we need to know, kasi when we know the form of our enemy, it's easier to deconstruct it, to undo, you know, the harm that it does. Number 2, once we know our enemy, we know the walls that we're trying to confront, let's try to equip ourselves. By equipping ourselves, let us know our community. Let's engage. Let us read more. Let's engage in the discussion. Let's know the language that is gender fair, gender sensible, gender sensitive. That's inclusive. Even we are not LGBT persons, if we are not, no, in case that we're not, even if we are not LGBT persons, let us equip ourselves so we are part of this much healthier, better future for our LGBTQIA plus fellow Filipinos and human beings. And once we know our walls and we equip ourselves, let's work together to break the wall. And by this, diba, let us be the agent of or creators, or yung kanina I wrote it down in the anthem, no? To start the change I long to see, the change I want to see. That's really a very powerful message from the song earlier, which I wrote down. And let's be the stewards of change by working together side by side, by being the protector of those being violated or the victims of abuse, especially when we know that their own safe spaces are being violated na already. So with that, marami pong salamat. I hope medyo nakatulong yung mga tinasa natin this afternoon. And in case that you'd like to contact me or you want to ask for questions if hindi man maabutan dito or ma-cover nitong discussion, you can email me with this university email that you can see on the screen. Marami pong salamat.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gio, for that fruitful and eye-opening discussion. My personal takeaway from the talk is that we should be the safe space for one another, that even if we don't belong to the LGBTQIA plus community, let's make it a habit to equip and educate ourselves to ensure an inclusive world for this community. Like Sir Gio said, let us be the stewards of change. Once again, thank you, Mr. Gio. With that, our audience is certainly burning with questions and are curious to know your answers to them. Now, let me invite our facilitator, Mr. Jeremiah Idriano, Inclusion Advocacy Unit Head of the Center for Inclusive Education, for the Q&A session. Take it away,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you, Alex. Gio, hi.
Yes. Hi.
Maraming salamat. Long
You're
time no see.
welcome. Thank you
Yes,
so much. Mm-mm.
yun, maraming tanong, no? Pero una sa lahat, I would
Okay.
like thank you, brother, tagal, sa mga hindi
Okay.
kanina, no? Classmate ko si Gio sa masters nung years ago.
Mm-mm.
Yes. Nakakatuwa kasi yung mga
Yep.
pinag-usapan, yung mga diniscuss mo kanina, ito yung mga pinag-uusapan natin habang naghihintay ng jeep mga 3 oras sa waiting shed sa tapat ng Romulo
Yeah.
Hall.
Mm-mm.
Nakakatawa, brings back memories talaga. And
Yes.
nakaka-proud kasi
Just like yesterday. Oo.
yes, nakaka-proud ka. Thank you
Thank you so
for
much.
sharing your personal experiences, and thank you for dedicating this talk to Doc Eileen and to Doc Cañete.
Yes.
Nawala sila at malaking kawalan sa atin sa sa Pilipinas. Sige, first question, Gio, ready ka na?
Okay. Yes.
Yes, parang usapan lang natin to dati sa pag tumatambay tayo,
Grad
no?
school. Oo.
Yeah, grad school tanungan. Gio, tanong ko lang, no, ano yung, kung okay lang naman sa'yo mag-share pa lalo, ano yung
Sige.
earliest memory mo na nasa isang safe space ka? Since safe spaces ang pinag-uusapan natin. Kanina na-share mo kasi yung not so safe space
Yeah.
na
The
experience mo.
otherwise. Oo.
Yung kabila naman, yung earliest memory mo na ikaw naman ay nasa safe space.
Okay. So, ano rin paano ba siya? Okay. Siguro I would qualify lang din siguro na yung notion of having a safe space when I was growing up was not really that prominent na phenomenon or practice na parang yung ganitong awareness to uphold spaces for realizing or embodying one's soji nga no or soji SC. But the earliest I can remember that I was really that free, siguro yung ganong free na na feeling was when I was in high school. When I was in high school, first year high school, pre-K to 12 program. Just to be clarified, just to clarify things, no, pre-K to 12. Kasi when I was in elementary, yung mga pre-high school years, malapit sa amin yung lugar. There are some schoolmates there are some schoolmates who know my house, my family, my relatives, ganyan. So, kung ano yung ginagawa ko sa school, may mga surveillance. There are like marites of the of the pre-social media era, no. So, yung bawat galaw ko nun measured. And it so happens, ito speaking of yung parang otherwise of the safe space. When I was in grade 6, hindi ko napapangalanan, but our advisor was homophobic in a sense na ayoko pagka-graduate ninyo ng high school, mami makita ko kayo sa kalsada na babakla-bakla dyan or magdadamit ganyan ng ganun. Ganun na yung language niya, no? So, well, on hindsight naman, you need to understand na produkto din siya ng kanyang konteksto. Yung panahon niya na ang alam lang nila ay babae, lalaki, yun. And then other than that ay hindi normal. Yun yung term nila, no? So to say. So parang when I was in grade 6, I was really that repressed. Na bawal kang kumilos ng ganyan kasi your teacher is looking, ganyan na ano ka, na parang pag nakita ka, mapapagalitan ka. And then ano pa siya presidente pa siya ng Girl Scout of the Philippines. So, ano siya, hindi ko na dadagdagan yung detail, baka ma-identify ng audience kung sino siya. But at any rate, gano'n yung pinanggagalingan niyang context. So, when I was in high school, lahat ng na-repress na gender, no, na pagkocontrol mo ng gender mo, siguro feeling ko doon siya sumabog. When I was in high school. So, when I was there, oh my God, freedom, literal na freedom. Na doon ko start na realize na I'm also self-identifying as a gay person, na ang attraction ko ay sa kapwa din, male at birth, no? At doon ka na nag-experiment no? At saka factor din siguro na malayo yung school sa bahay. As in literal na malayo. So kung meron mga nangyayari doon, parang ano siya, Azkaban. So hindi nila malalaman. No? So parang napaka-dated tuloy ng mga reference ko, no? Sorry. Ayun siya. No, so yun, I think in high school, no? Sa high school siya.
Thank you, Gio. Lumalabas edad nating dalawa sa mga
Yeah.
sinasabi.
Sorry ha. Okay.
Pero yun, thank you for sharing that, no? So physical distance din. Yung distansya mo dun sa not so safe space ang naging safe space mo. Tama. Thank you for sharing.
Yes. Mm-mm.
Ito naman, memory, nabanggit mo kanina, dapat tayo mismo ay maging safe
Yes.
space para sa ibang tao. Ano naman yung earliest memory mo na naging safe space ka para sa iba?
Oh. Oh, golly. Pero yung earliest memory, no?
Yes.
Ayoko naman sabihin ng college na kasi doon ako talaga nag-specialize in LGBT no? Pero siguro I would go to that. Siguro nung nag-college ako, hindi ko na sabi ko ilang taon, pero ano rin naman, tawag dito, when I was still starting nung college ng history, yung program ko sa SBA history, hindi ganoon pinag-aaralan yung ganitong topic. When I was, remember, history is supposedly a social science discipline. It needs to be factual, empirical. May schools of thought sa history natin, especially in the Philippines, no, na may pagdistansya sa theory. No? Although interdisciplinary, nagko-cognate na, pero yung theory-driven na investigation na ginagawa natin sa Philippine studies, for instance, very rare yon gawin sa history way back in my time, no? Sa though may mga may mga ganun ng approach pero mapolitik ang history yung wag na natin balikan yung part na yun. But at any rate, hindi ganoon tinututukan yung LGBT. Most of the studies on LGBT nanggagaling sa mga disciplines outside of history. Janelle Garcia's pioneering work, Philippine Gay Culture, binaba ito bakla si Lizo MSM. Master's thesis niya yun in literature, comparative literature. So labas siya ng history. But it's a foundational text sa LGBT history ng Philippines. Na iba pa mga studies from psychology, studies from anthropology, linguistics, no? Si Jose Javier Reyes, no? Nag-publish siya on Sword Speak way back in 1970s. So mga ganong studies, no? Now, siguro tingin ko, in a way, hindi naman ako pioneering, no? Pero siguro I'm trying to pass the baton, no? From these earlier pioneering scholars, no? Na-observe ko, after ko, ilan na rin ang mga sumunod na mga LGBT themed ang studies sa history. At least in my university, I'm not sure in others, no. May isa nagpi-PhD sa Europe ngayon pero sa UP Diliman siya, si Kiel Suarez, no, on the turn of the century parang imperial project on homosexuality pero ang focus is the Philippines. May mga ganun na, no, pero of course iba siya kasi halos kasabay ko siya pero magkaiba kami ng ginagalawang espasyo. Pero currently siguro in a more concrete way kasi nag-a-advising na rin ako ng mga estudyante on this topic. So parang in a way, gano'n na rin ako gumagawa ng safe space para sa kanila on the younger generation of history students. Na dati at my time, very rare. Nagkataon lang that our current dean, which was my thesis advisor way back then, siya yung nag-create ng safe space for me. And now I'm channeling that as instructor na rin ng history. Yun. I'm not sure. Siguro, as a model din, as a student before, baka yun yung notion ko na, okay, pwede itong pag-aralan, mga fellow history majors and fellow scholar ng bayan, pwede itong pag-aralan. No? Yung ganun siya.
Actually,
I don't know
naalala
if
ko
I
yun.
answered your question. Oh, sorry, yes.
You did actually. Maganda
Okay,
yung
thank you.
maganda yung sagot mo kasi ang paggawa ng safe space, hindi lang siya yung parang, okay, pwede kang maging out sa akin, pwede kang maging ikaw sa akin. Hindi lang yun eh. Ngayon, sinasabi mo, pwede mong aralin itong topic na to. Kasama ako. No? Nagbukas ka ng for me nga ang dating sa akin, and ito, I could attest to this dahil sa mga usapan natin years ago tungkol sa mga ganitong topic, no?
Mm.
Nag-create ka ng safe space kung saan mas lalalim at mas lalawak pa ang pag-intindi natin sa ganitong topic. Sa topic ng sexuality, sa topic ng gender. At
Yes.
multidisciplinary siya. Naalala ko yan kasi bilang psych major, sinasabihan mo ko dati na, paano yung ganito, paano yung ganyan, na perspektibo ng psych. So, thank you Gio for sharing that, no, na pwede tayong maging safe space sa iba't ibang klaseng paraan. Siguro next question ko, Gio, ay mas practical at galing to sa audience natin.
Okay. Baka
Sige.
maraming questions sa audience, please. I love answering questions.
Yung
Ubusin
mga
natin yung time nila.
marami pa tayong time, no?
Okay.
So ito, isang question. Let me read this. As a fact, sorry, 2 questions siya. Pagsamahin ko na lang, no? Medyo
Nakikita ba din
related.
siya dito? Sa chat box or no?
Wala siya sa chat box. Na anonymous kasi yung tanong.
Okay, sige. I'll just listen.
Yes. As a faculty member, may I ask your opinion if there is a need to tell your students your gender orientation, or they can just see this through your actions? Okay, that's number 1.
Okay.
Maganda to kasi professor ka, Gio.
Actually, sorry. Nawawala ba ako? Yes.
Hindi. Okay, question number 2 na medyo related din naman, no? At ito ay nasa loob ka pa rin ng konteksto ng classroom. Since teachers cannot always remember those with preferences in using specific pronouns, would it be disrespectful to the student when sometimes I forget to use their preferred pronoun? Okay, so yung first question, yes. So ulitin ko lang, yung first question is about the professor, kung kailangan ba niyang sabihin yung orientation niya. And number 2, the second question is about kailangan ba niya or disrespectful ba pag nakalimutan niya yung preferred pronoun ng student niya?
Okay, thank you. Actually, medyo tagos sa sarili. Pareho yung tanong. Number 1, yung first question, personal din to. So medyo along the grain, no? Kasi ang first job ko talaga is a high school elementary teacher. This was a decade ago. Okay. So, at the time, ako mismo yung ano dito, at fault, no, siguro. Hindi ko ina-admit sa mga estudyante ko that I am a gay person. Hindi ko sinasabi. Hindi ko ino-open. So hindi ko alam if they already know now or they had siguro feeling ko naman nararamdaman nila yon. Kasi nga siguro sa gestures or tone minsan, 'di ba? Pero hindi ko siya explicitly sinasabi kasi siguro produkto din ako ng sarili kong context. Na kasi nung bata ako, lumaki ako doon sa framing na hindi mo mai-imagine yung gay person acting as yung pagsabing bakla, ang nasa image mo is yung feminine. Hindi mo may imagine yung nakikita natin yun sa mga BL shows ngayon, 'di ba, na parang manly tignan pero ano sila, gay person, no? When I was young, hindi ganoon ka represented yung ganung klase ng gendered expressions and identities, no? So when I was teaching, yun, isang malaking bagay na siguro hindi na pa sa pinagsisisihan pero parang napapaisip ako bakit ko hindi sinabi. Ba't hindi ako naging open? Siguro kasi a part of me was also trying to distance, no? Kasi mga bata yung yung tuturuan ko, yung mga kasama ko, no? And I don't want them to see me siguro at the time, no, when I was young, hindi ko rin siguro kaya kontrolin ang ano ko, ang emosyon, no? Baka mamaya mainis ka, magalit ka, bata 'yon, no? Na baka mamaya mas makikita nila ako based on my gender or my identity rather than as a teacher, no? Na kung competent man ako sa tinuturo ko at that time, no? So siguro that's part of my struggle then. At saka siguro din yung community ay hindi ko rin kasi gauge at that time kung inclusive yung community for an LGBT teacher. Though merong mga teachers na open. may mga co-leagues ako at the time or co-workers at the time na openly gay sila. Alam ng mga estudyante. Pero siguro naging ano ko na lang din yun, reservation ko sa sarili. I don't know, or that. Which is, ako rin, napapaisip ako bakit. Pero, tingin ko naman alam na nila ngayon. No, kung nanonood man sila dito, hello, no? Yung mga estudyante ko dati, no? So, pero hindi ko kayang i-claim yung term na professor kasi we know that it's a really the top professorial rank, di ba? Siguro as an instructor, no, as the one who teaches in college level, no. On a personal scale, tingin ko hindi ko naman kailangan i-out yung sarili ko kasi parang obvious naman na ito yung inaaral ko and I'm gay. Pero hindi natin dapat i-assume, just to be clear, na porke taga-aral ng LGBT, porke taga-aral ng gay or ng trans experiences ay gano'n na rin sila. No? Yan yung question din sa akin before eh. Parang pag sinabi mo ba, Gio, na gay specialist, you mean gay sila as a person or inaaral lang nila yung gay as scholars? No, minsan kasi either or yon or minsan both. Ayaw na natin magpangalan pero may mga scholars na mapapaisip ka lang din in the Philippine context. May mga nag-aaral sa area na to, mapapaisip ka na lang din, straight kaya sila? Pero we don't want to out anyone, di ba? We don't have the right to out another person. Hayaan natin silang mag-express nun, no? Pero yung question, yung ano kasi yung crux of the question is dapat ba? Parang normative yung question eh. May take on that is hindi dapat. Hindi naman dapat maging question yung sexuality nung professor at hindi dapat yun ang maging ikutan ng diskurso. Unless siguro kung ang topic nyo is gender and society or gender and sexuality, nagtuturo siya ng gender at na-open niya yun, pwede siguro. No? Pero if we want to ask that, let's just ask it respectfully siguro. No? Sir, if you don't mind, or ma'am, if you don't mind, no, tsaka nyo i-open yung discussion, you can answer this if you're comfortable. Kung hindi, dismiss, di ba? Pero I do not know kung lahat ba ng mga nagtuturo sa kolehiyo eh ganito din yung mindset na medyo open sa ganitong klase na pagtatanong, baka mamaya masamain, no? Siguro talungin mo lang siya after the sem, baka ibaksak ka pa. So yun yung medyo practical na side, no? So wala ba ako? No, hindi naman. Okay ako. Okay. So number 2 na question, yung pronoun. Siguro same thing din dun sa last point na sinagot ko, no? Pag nakakalimutan siguro din ng teacher, ng professor, ng instructor, pasensya na lang din kasi imagine naman natin ilan din naman ng tinuturuang estudyante. Hindi din naman natin lahat natatandaan lahat. And as much as possible, ako hindi ko alam kung ako lang to, ayoko na natatandaan ko masyado yung mga estudyante. Kasi may tendency na baka mamaya maging bias ka doon sa isa over the other. Parang as much as possible, I try to keep a distance with them. Pero at the same time naman, no, on an online setting, no, parang we want to respect din naman their spaces. One way to siguro ensure na rin kung online setup yung or hybrid is yung maglalagay ka ng ng gender pronoun mo sa tabi, no? Pero which I didn't do pala, no. Dapat meron dito he, him, 'di ba? May mga iba ganoon ang ginagawa eh, no. Pero I'm not telling naman na on an actual space paglabas niyo meron kayong nameplate diyan or dapat may nakalagay na color code na ito ako, no. Hindi naman ganoon, no. So siguro one way na rin na we can ask the person, oh sorry, am I using the right pronoun ba? Are you comfortable with that pronoun? No? Pero ano rin yan ongoing pa rin siyang debate until now yung paggamit lang ng singular they, 'di ba? Though the APA, 'di ba, the current APA edition sa academe, okay na doon, no? Pero may iba na may reservation pa din diyan, 'di ba? So ayun, I don't know if I answered the question.
You did actually. Thank you, Gio, for sharing your experience mo na naman, no. Nakakatawa kasi
experience. Thank you.
Experience mo na naman. So, konkreto yung lagi mo nakakwento. May follow-up question na related dito, no, sa classroom setup. Well, actually, school setup mas malaki.
Okay.
Ayaw niya magpapangalan ulit.
Okay, school in general. Okay.
Yes, school in general. To what
Okay.
extent should the school, ulitin ko to what extent should the school be considered in dealing with students in the LGBTQIA+ community? Should schools be considerate of all things? Kumbaga, where do schools draw the line in not really accepting parang sige, let's use the term accepting. In
Okay.
accepting yung ginagawa ng or kung paano mag-act, I'm assuming hindi niya sinabi specifically, no? Pero I'm assuming yung katulad nung, let's say, for example, you identify as a woman kahit na biologically male ka, gagamit ka ng restroom na pangbabae. So yung mga ganung bagay
Yeah.
ba?
Oo.
Kumbaga, from your perspective, hanggang saan? Where do schools draw the line?
Okay. So actually kasi 'di ba nagiging topic din natin 'to sa institutions, 'di ba? Kay Dr. Natividad. Okay. But anyways, kaya ko yun nabanggit kasi I remember in our institutions class na yung mga social institutions like the education system, the schools, in a sense we can look at them as forms of social control. So parang ano yan bahagi siya ng malaking mechanism na tinitrain na tayo as young students, as pupils, up to college levels para maging ready sa merkado. Parang pinapackage ka na as a commodity, as a product na ito yung aming brand. So kailangan prim and proper, maganda haircut, pag lalaki kailangan 3x4, pag babae ganito, kailangan naka-uniform. O hindi pwede yan kasi kahit mag-identify ka as yung quote-unquote babading-bading, 'di ba? Or kasi yung language nila nung earlier generations, 'di ba? No, hindi pa naman uso yung term na trans noon, no? So hindi pwede yung magdadamit kang pang babae, 'di ba? Kasi hindi ka naman quote-unquote babae. Yung language nila is very discriminating and very exclusivist. Other sila no? So yung question of intervention, I think meron na ngayong 'di ba? Safe spaces for for students in the universities in schools. So sa university level understandable meron, no? Pero minsan nagkakaroon pa rin ng dress code issue, nagkakaroon ng ganyan, 'di ba, sa mga universities na for sure yung mga nakikinig sa atin may mga institutions sila na minsan ganyan pa din, 'di ba? Pero sa kabila ng pag-abante natin ng SOGI, 'di ba? Kasi baka may mga interest yung institution, no? May ina-uphold sila mga principles na taliwas yung pag celebrate ng gender sexual diversity, no, doon sa gusto nilang i-maintain, no. Yun yung medyo political na yung part na yun siguro to answer that, ang kailangan nating himayin, bakit ba kasi may ganitong control? Yung reason bakit may ganitong control, ba't kailangan i-regulate? Why do we have to govern people's lives in terms of gender and sexuality in the way they represent themselves? Bakit kailangan? Kasi ba gusto ba natin silang maging market ready? So parang nire-reduce lang natin sila as products. 'Di ba? You need to interrogate yung ating kumbaga as an institution, you need to interrogate your own principles Ano ba yung iyong etika mo as an institution? Ba't mo kailangang i-regulate 'yan? So, kung hindi naman siya crucial, I mean, 'di ba parang makakaapekto ba sa sa identity ng iyong school kung mag-a-allow ka ng mga students na iba-iba ang gendered and sexual expressions and identifications na pumasok sa institusyon and be a proud product of your institution? Makakaapekto ba yon sa quality nila eventually as a graduate, 'di ba? Parang hindi naman tingin ko hindi naman factor ang iyong gender, ang iyong sexuality sa iyong pagiging matalino, sa iyong pag-excel sa industriyang iyong napili, no? Kung ano mang itong field na ito. And I think school still has a role or schools still have a role, no? Sa usaping ito, sa gender and sexuality, and that is to be what we mentioned, the stewards of change, the the agents of upholding safe spaces. Kasi even in school setup may mga violations pa ring mangyayari diyan, may mga nangyayaring dito discrimination, no, among students, between the faculty and the students. Pwedeng yung faculty nang insult sa student or the other way around, hindi natin alam ngayon, no. So minsan kailangan ang institusyon, I think kailangan mag-step up ang mga universidad, ang mga eskwelahan na dahil ito na ang natin ngayon, ang laban natin ngayon ay i-accept yung diversity. I think ang role niyo na dapat ng institusyon ay sila yung mag-safeguard ng ng pagiging healthy ng environment, no? Na iwasan na magkaroon ng mga violations and harms. For as long as hindi nayuyurakan yung karapatan ng mga tao, I think yun yung role ng school, to uphold human rights nung bawat isa, regardless of what genders or identities we self-identify.
Thank you, Gio.
Yun.
Siguro follow-up question ko about it. Um,
Mm-mm.
Anong masasabi mo? So I believe you're familiar with
Sorry?
hospitality. You're familiar with the hospitality and management field, no? Kung saan strict yung dress code kasi kailangan
Yeah.
korbata at lahat, no? Naka-coat and tie yung mga lalaki, naka-blazer tsaka skirt ang mga babae.
Yeah, I get that.
Anong opinion mo sa kasi merong ganitong pag-uusap, hindi ko na lang papangalanan.
Mm-mm.
The concern here is the professors are open in kumbaga allowing the student to dress how they want. So for example, if you're biologically male pero mas gusto mo magdamit ng pambabae and nasa hospitality and management yung kurso mo or yung program mo, yung professors walang problema. Pero their concern is paglabas mo ng school, the reality of life is that
Yeah.
yung papasukan mong trabaho, hindi ganoon, iba mag-isip. So, kumbaga,
Yeah.
sina professor, si department, ano siya parang gusto namin, pero ayaw din namin magbigay ng false hope kay estudyante. Kasi gagawa kami ng safe space dito for the next 3 or 4 years sa school na pwede silang mag-express kung paano nila gustong i-express yung sarili nila. Pero paglabas nila sa totoong mundo, pag nagtatrabaho na sila, mababasag lahat yon. Anong opinion mo doon, Gio?
Okay. So siguro nakatahi yan doon sa naging experience ko din kasi in the university from which I studied, no. Talagang liberal talagang pwede kang mag-express, no. Even may field of studies, LGBT. Tapos nung pumasok ko sa teaching, no, siguro yung remnants nung nung old ways of thinking, kailangan mo mag-project ng medyo yun nga sabi cis heteronormative na way of being, no. So yan it's really systemic nakita mo yung alignment parang na yung schools ay nagiging form of parang manufacturing site siya for students as products ng labor force sa field. So parang ang question diyan parang kung babasagin natin yung yung down to the core is nag-a-align ba yung demand ng market, which is also hindi lang siya issue ng competency sa market ang tinitingnan pero meron din silang set of gendered expressions and sets of expectations in terms of gender na ini-impose, no. So mahirap siya sagutin kasi kailangan natin ng data. Kung sa field ba mismo ngayon gano'n pa rin ba yung landscape? Gano'n pa rin ba? I mean, hindi ako babad do'n sa field ng ng hospitality and pero that's a sad reality I think hindi lang yan yung industriya na ganyan mag-isip, no? Siguro ang challenge is that papaano natin mababago yung mentality doon sa labas? Paano natin ma-extend itong ganitong yung thinking? Siguro one way is itong ganitong diskurso. This is just one channel para mabago natin yung perspective to create more safe spaces. Pero kailangan natin ng mas konkretong action. Kailangan i-lobby doon sa mga nasa sektor na yon, no? Or siguro kailangan mas palakasin yung mga policies natin on creating safe spaces. Paano siya mag-filter infiltrate doon sa mga industries na medyo pa rin nakakahon pa rin doon sa binary na framework. Yun yung mahirap siya sagutin at this point, no? Pero kailangan siya parang kada situation meron tayong ganitong perspective yung alam natin, di ba, gawin, pero yung actual measures, yung strategies kailangan mo siyang gawin along the grain. Kailangan mo siyang puntahan do'n, 'no? So ano, hanggang do'n lang yung kaya ko masagot for now. Kasi I can't represent yung ano, yung industry because I'm not there. Mahirap naman magsalita at mag-impose at magaling sa kanila, 'no? So pero yun yung nakikita ko, kailangan magkaroon ng pag-uusap, 'no, with those in power doon sa sector na yun, nung hospitality ano, et cetera, and other
Thank you,
fields. Yes, oo.
thank you, Gio. Yes, actually, totoo yun eh. The reality of life is that, tama ka, hindi lang naman sa hospitality and management na field, no? Corporate in general, lalo na yung mga
Mm,
nasa traditional side, ganun pa rin sila
yes.
in terms of dress code, unfortunately. And thank you for sharing your opinion. And tama ka, this is a very, very long battle kasi hindi lang naman ngayon to na-discuss, even years past, no?
Mm,
Na isang malaking diskurso na to, yung sa kung paano hahayaang mag-express ang isang empleyado kung sino siya talaga, pero at the
mm,
same time being professional, mind the quotation marks.
mm,
'Di ba? Ayun, tama, ganda ng sinabi mo kanina na hindi lang naman competency eh, yung pagiging normal. And kasi yun yung
mm,
tingin, unfortunately, again, merong set na ng norms na nabuo na nagde-discuss kung si ay or ah, nagkukulong sa'yo kung normal ka ba or professional ka ba. And
mm.
unfortunately, nadadali ang ating expression, no? Gio, next question, kung okay
Okay,
lang.
go.
Ito naman, more on sa support. Babasahin
Okay.
ko rin. Again, two questions siya na medyo related. How do I help, ito very specific sa Filipino deaf community naman. How do I help the Filipino deaf emotionally and mentally in dealing with their low self-esteem and self-identity concerns in accepting who they are? Okay? Siguro pwede mo rin siyang sagutin mas
Pero
general.
medyo specific siya for ano, eh, 'no,
Yes,
sa
for the Filipino
uh,
deaf, no? Pero if
oo.
you want to answer it sa mas general, Filipinos in general, ano yung magiging tip
Sorry,
mo? And
can you repeat the question? Yung
sige,
phrasing niya.
how do I help the Filipino deaf emotionally and mentally in dealing with in their low self-esteem and self-identity concerns in accepting who they are? So this is about them being conflicted yung
Mm,
kung sino sila, yung identity nila.
mm.
Next question, no? What
Okay,
kind
sige.
of safe space, what kind of safe space do the queer youth in the Philippines need the most right now? Kumbaga, si question number one, ano yung tip mo sa mga kabataan, no, na merong concerns with regards to their mental health and low self-esteem because of yung concerns nila with their identity, yung mga quote-unquote confused pa. And the second question is about ano yung safe space na kailangan ng mga kabataang Pilipino na part ng LGBTQIA plus community sa ngayon.
Mm. Okay. So medyo mabibigat yung questions, 'no. So kasi 'pag sabi Kabataang Pilipino kasama pa ba ako doon? So, well
Gio,
technically
kasama pa
yung
tayo.
definition ng youth is up to 35, 'di ba? So we know.
Kasama pa
Pero
tayo.
hindi, I mean yung generation literal. Anyways, sige. Sagutin natin sa number one. Ang una kong naisip when I heard the question is this: parang if you're a Filipino deaf person tapos LGBT, you are ano, intersected by multiple um questions of inclusivity, eh. Kung 'di ba parang nagkakaroon ka na ng othering because of your, tama ba yung term disability? Am I using an accurate term or there's a better term for that?
Condition or learning need or kung ano man. Yes.
Oo, yung because of the condition. Okay, so thank you for correcting. So yung condition, yung physical condition and your ano, number one. And number two, in terms of your gender and sexual identity, or sense of belonging, naiiba ka na, naiiba ka pa rin, naiiba ka pa rin. So parang nagtatagpo-tagpo na siya, di ba? So yun yung tinatawag natin sa uh, social theory na intersectionality of different struggles, no? Kasi usually na-highlight lang doon yung class, yung pagiging mahirap, no, or yung lower class, or pagiging yung racial issue, ng iba yung lahi, you're non-white, hindi ka privileged. White meaning Caucasian, no, hindi Chinese, no. Or Korean, no. Three is this yung gender sexuality, no. Pero ito nga yung physical condition din kasama yan, minsan pati religion, age is also included, beauty, yung itsura ng tao, kung 'di ba, nagiging part din siya ng discrimination, yung body and embodiment, no. So maraming factors, maraming aspects itong intersectionality, that's why intersecting nga sila. So siguro what we can do, gaya na nasabi ko kanina, let's adopt a more gender fair grammar, language. And hindi lang ito nakalimita doon sa verbal, no? Pero yung mga actions natin, kung di ako nagkakamali, hindi kasi education yung background ko, so I'm trying to borrow from our education fellows, no? Na yung sinasabi nila minsan sa schools daw, when you're teaching, mahalaga din yung tinatawag nila na hidden curriculum. What you do as a teacher, as an instructor, minsan tuturuan mo yung mga estudyante mo na okay, yung mag-fall in line, arms forward, yung pagdidisiplina ng paglalakad, yung pagsasalita, even yung sarili mong gesture as a role model sa kanila, nagtuturo ka na dun eh. It's a hidden curriculum. I think we can follow that pattern when we try to reach out sa mga Filipino deaf na LGBT, 'di ba? The way we speak to them, the way we engage with them, hindi lang ito nagpapakita ng model before them, before their eyes, pero we're also becoming a model for other people na tularan tayo, no? Na ito yung magandang paraan na pakikitungo para lahat included doon sa conversation. So I think that's why it's really more of embodying yung inclusive na actions and language, embodiment yung number one. There's a second question for the ano yun? What kind of safe space do you think the current generation need the most right now? No, parang okay, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of the younger generation. Hello, students. Yung mga estudyante ko, no? So, actually, ano uso pa rin hanggang ngayon, yung intergenerational antagonism in a sense. Parang, pag maririnig mo yun, yung makakabataan ngayon, ganito na, iba na sila ngayon, ganyan. Which is, totoo naman, kasi kaya nga generation na tawag, kasi iba-iba ng conditions, ng interest, kakaiba ng taste, ng style, no? So minsan nagiging root of of differences, 'di ba? And indifference, no? Parang hindi mo sila ma-feel. So siguro ang magiging sagot ko dito, it's not just the need of the younger parang ano yung question niya? The kind of safe space that the Gen Z or the younger generation needs right now, hindi lang yon. Siguro sasagutin natin across, no? Siguro ang magandang sagot dito, we need to be more compassionate and empathic to each other, yung across the generation, yung hindi naman older pero yung generation na mas nauna. Let's respect also the taste and the interest and yung mga choices ng kabataan ngayon. Kailangan magkaroon ng ganong understanding eh, yung quote unquote older generation or yung medyo senior generation maintindihan yung mga bata. Eh yung mga bata, intindihin din ninyo yung generation namin na medyo nauna ng bahagya sa inyo. At saka yung mga mas nauna sa atin. Kasi even before you were born, ganyan din ang struggle namin. No? Na yung kawalan ng pagkakaunawa across the generations, yung intergenerational understanding, ay nagke-create ng pagiging exclusivist eh. Kaya nga, siguro when I was younger, hindi ko maramdaman yung inclusive na spasyo na na-enjoy ng mga bata ngayon. Kasi way back before, hindi pwede yung magkukulay-kulay ka ng pink, tapos sa susunod na araw, magkukolor green, color blue yung buhok, na iba-iba yung expression. No, parang na hindsight ngayon naisip ko parang nung bata ako parang iisip ko yan parang pwede kaya dadating kaya yung point na parang ma-actualize ko yung mga napapanood ko sa anime parang isekai yan dating or yung sa mga yung parang in other countries na parang beyond reality. May reality at the time yung yung fashion statement. Ngayon you can see it outside. Kahapon start ng klase namin sa not klase pero yung school, yung semester kahapon. Nakita ko yung porma ng mga estudyante, ako naiinitan for them kasi yung porma nila ngayon yung light academia or dark academia fashion nila. No, naiintindihan natin saan sila nanggagaling, no? Siguro yun din yung isa ring kailangan. Siguro I'm trying to answer now yung question, no. Siguro for us na medyo ahead dun sa younger generation ngayon, intindihin natin sila. For the younger generation, let's be respectful sa mga nauna sa atin. Kasi napapansin ko din minsan harsh yung language eh. Boomer, mga gano'n, no? So parang instead nagke-create tayo ng safe space for a healthy conversation between the elderly ones and the younger ones, tayo mismong younger, kung kasama man tayo doon, ang nag-exclude sa older generation. Ang goal natin dapat, ma-convince natin sila na valid ang ating experiences, na tayo ang sasalo sa sa mundong ito, no? Tayo ang magpapatuloy ng baton no, moving forward. So, let's respect, 'di ba? It's really it boils down to respect and empathy, compassion, 'di ba? Yun nga. Yun ang na magkaroon ng compassion.
Respect and empathy. Thank you dun, Gio.
Oo.
I have to share this. Natawa ko nung sinabi mong anime, tapos kung paano manamit. Magic Knight 3 Hindi ko makakalimutan.
Oh my God!
Bigla mong kinanta yung Filipino version ng intro niya habang nagkaklase tayo. Tawang-tawa ako kasi wala lang. Shinare mo na
Oh my
mahilig
God! Naalala mo pa yan?
ako
Imagine
pa.
ka na sa Tagalog version.
Yes.
Yeah,
So ang
okay.
galing. Tama. Compassion and tawag dito,
Empathy.
makinig. Empathy and makinig sa other generations. Kasi ang ganda ng sinabi mo, no? Yung kumbaga, within the yung community as a whole, may concerns na siya of being marginalized. Yung tao pa sa loob, because of their generation, nag-aaway pa. So parang dinodouble, triple, quadruple whammy nyo ang sarili.
Yes.
So, tama. And,
sorry,
and
if I can add, sorry.
Okay. Sure.
Maganda na nabanggit mo yun eh. Parang may othering within the othering. Othering within the othered. Kasi lumalabas na rin nito eh. Even in the UNDP USAID report ng 2014 being LGBT in Asia, may othering based on class, based on religion, na pati yung mga earlier studies at ni Roland Paitan na sa loob ng Pride March, halimbawa, yung Pride March, yung medyo privileged yung mga LGBT, hindi umaattend sa actual na Pride. Umaattend sila doon sa mga post-party. So parang nagkakaroon ng division amongst the community na dapat nga nagsusupport sa isa't isa. No? At saka siguro itong ganitong language of respecting, empathy, compassion, hindi lang ito nakakahon, nakatali sa usapin ng gender, sexuality o sa topic natin today or inclusion dito. Pwede mo rin siyang gamitin as a lente sa ongoing political debates. Siguro yun yung challenge ko sa sarili ko rin at tinatry ko i-share sa iba kasi most of the time makakakita tayo ng tao na iba yung political leaning sa atin. Hindi lang in terms of gender or ideology pero of other matters, no? In the current state of things ng ating politika, 'di ba? Magkakaiba tayo ng kulay, kumbaga. So minsan inuunawa ko rin, tinatry kong lumugar, bakit sila pumipili ng ganitong bakit ganito yung political choices nila? Saan sila nanggagaling? Ano yung konteksto nila? Yung pamilya ba nila ay solid supporter nito? Hence, kung sila ay mag-iiba ng choice, ma-jeopardize sila yung kanilang belonging doon sa kanilang pamilya. Minsan ganun eh, you need to understand din yung context sa pinanggagalingan nila at bakit ganito yung nagiging choices natin in our everyday life. So I think magandang mapupulot na equipping or yung tool no from gender analysis, pwede mo siyang i-apply in other aspects of life. Hindi lang politika, hindi lang ito disability or yung physical condition no na language no. Sorry ginagamit ko yung term na disability kasi sa critical social theory minsan ginagamit namin naka-inclusion this and then ability. So parang you're playing with words. So sorry kung hindi na siyang ginagamit na term.
Thank you, Gio, sa pag-share nun. Tama, no? Yung othering habang nasa loob ka ng other is really frustrating. Gio, ito naman, since nabuksan mo na yung ibang issues regarding gender, ito yung mga, I guess, mas controversial concerns or issues with regards to gender, and I have to ask you these questions. First, let's talk about mass media and the new media sa Philippine context.
Okay.
Ang tanong ay, safe space ba ang Philippine mass media and Philippine new media? So kumbaga traditional media, meaning yung tawag dito?
TV, film,
film,
radio,
newspaper. Yes. The new
print
media,
and
social media and all. Safe space ba
internet.
for the LGBTQIA+ community, in your opinion?
Actually, malaking bagay yung emergence ng what you call the new media or the digital media or the social media. No, ang laking turning point niya sa pag-create ng spaces for the LGBTQIA communities. Like, for instance, no, before, walang malinaw na avenue to gather together. Mahirap mag-communicate, mahirap malaman sino ang kapwa mo rin LGBT. Now you have the dating apps, halimbawa, no? And you can track virtually sino-sino kayo doon sa community within 5 meter, 10 meter, or ilang kilometer yung radius nyo. 'Di ba? Iba-ibang app 'yan. Merong wholesome na app, merong not so wholesome na app, no? May mga ganon, no? In the community, no? So in a way, that creates a space that's inclusive. Pero ironic din siya kasi it also creates a not so inclusive space in itself. Parang two sides of a coin. Let's give an example. Halimbawa, nagiging issue ito, no, sa sexuality. Yung pwede mong pangalan ng app or wag na lang. Magbigay na tayo isang gay dating app or very, very general. No? Marami yan. No? Halimbawa, makikita mo doon sa loob, no, may mga profile pictures sila, iba-ibang images, minsan yung katawan nila yung kanilang hina-highlight, minsan naman ay mga mukha ng hindi mo alam kung sino na character, no, kung di ka familiar, or minsan blank lang, no. Tapos tigdig, tutunog siya, no. Ngayon, meron tong mga hashtag din minsan or mga label kasi may profile din yun di ba, para malaman nila kung magmamatch kayo, isang tingin pa lang. May mga terms sila doon, halimbawa, hashtag no trace. No trace. So napaisip ako nung una ko nakita yun. Sabi ko, ano meaning nun? Yung pala, ibig nila sabihin, walang bakas, hindi halata. I mean, not feminine, not effeminate. So parang, yun yung equivalent nun is mask for mask. O yung parang astig sa astig. Parang yun yung term nila. Bawal ang Barbie, quote unquote, yun yung term doon. Yung mga femme, may mga ganong othering sa loob. So ngayon, mapapansin mo yung sa dynamics na yun. Kumbaga may mga nauna na nag-aral nito, no? Mapapansin mo yung dynamics sa loob ng ganitong gay dating app. Supposedly, ito ay espasyo para sa atin na maging open at magkaroon ng pagkakataon na maka-meet up yung tingin natin magiging accepted tayo, no? Or kung ano man yung ating layunin doon, no? Cruising man or otherwise, romantic or friendly, no? Pero siya rin mismo yung naging instrumento para magkaroon ng othering. Hindi ka hindi ayoko sa iyo kasi masyado kang feminine or kumbaga meron pa nga doon minsan nakalagay naka-X na emoji and then FM naka-X sa trans. May ganong exclusivist na language. Yung supposedly inclusive na app. May mga ganon. So even in sexual preferences, may mga rin yan. May mga differences. So that's new media. So parang kumbaga ambivalent siya eh. Parang paradox actually. No? Yung traditional media, actually questionable nga kung pa ba, may power pa ba ang quote-unquote traditional media. Kasi parang ngayon, ako personally hindi na ako nanonood ng TV unless yung subscription na yung titignan ko, no? Yung movie na lang or yung mga ano, yung mga series na lang yung titignan. Pero yung TV as in yung napapanood natin ng mga ano, station wars before, parang wala na akong paki ngayon doon. Parang hindi na siya yung nag-shape ng ano, ng ng ano ko ngayon, ng idea. No, siguro may certain segment ng society na may paki pa rin diyan, yung mga nasa alta na nagsusubscribe ng mga high-end magazine siguro na nagbabayad para ipaskil yung mukha nila doon, yung product nila. Tapos bubuklatin nila, oh, here's my product. So siguro sila lang yung may paki doon ngayon, yung mga high society, no. Pero sa ating mga ordinaryo, no, pababa, parang hindi na gano'n ka-powerful 'yun. So, I think the battleground now is the social media. Ayokong gamitin yung new kasi may othering ka na rin do'n, eh, old and new, 'di ba? So, yung social media siguro ang ano, ang labanan na ngayon. So, yeah, it's really ambivalent and, with that ambivalence parang parang gender din siya 'no, fluid, mahirap maikahon. Kailangan lang natin siguro, yun nga, equip ourselves so we can protect, 'no, yung ating sarili kapag nakaka-encounter tayo ng medyo, hindi na 'to safe. Medyo ano na 'to, medyo nava-violate ako dito, medyo naa-other ako, 'no. So, yun lang din. Let's be sensitive also kasi yung sa mga gano'ng mga app minsan namba-block na lang 'pag hindi ka trip, eh. Parang minsan nakaka-hurt din yun 'pag ikaw yung na-block, 'di ba? Pero on the other side, meron ding mga instances na nasa cyber stalk ka rin or nasa cyberbully ka rin dun kasi parang kinukulit ka, eh, "O sige na, mag-chat ka," ganyan. Yung mga gano'ng instances. So, yeah. I'm not sure also sorry I'm not sure if it's fine that I'm opening this ano, parang reflexivity. Hindi ko rin alam kung tama ba na ino-open ko 'to in a public discussion such as this kasi yung ganitong mga espasyo, yung mga gay dating app halimbawa, ay supposedly dapat hindi ito ino-open pero now I'm opening it in the discourse. Baka mamaya maging ethical issue siya. Kasi nga supposedly tago ito, eh, 'di ba? Parang naghahanap nga silang espasyo na makapagtago kasi ayaw nga na makita sila in a larger community and by the larger society. So yun lang. I'm just ano lang, having a disclaimer siguro in a sense, no?
Pero thank you for sharing that, lalo na sa mga
Mm.
hindi familiar sa dynamics sa loob ng isang dating app.
Oo.
Kasi, sige, let's say na this topic is taboo, pero it's something that we should discuss kasi it's worth discussing. So thank you for sharing that.
And not hindi lang din siguro worth discussing siguro kasi it also affects us. Actual
Definitely.
human lives, oo. So kung di natin
Mhm.
pag-usapan, paano natin maayos? Siguro yun yung isang
Exactly.
bagay. Oo.
And to be fair, years ago, taboo itong topic ng webinar natin at hindi dapat pinag-uusapan. And yet ngayon pinag-uusapan natin. So, maiging i-discuss yung mga ganitong bagay sa isang pang-akademikong medium or setup kasi natitignan natin ng objectively ang mga bagay-bagay. Gio, siguro next question. Anong opinion mo about sa paggamit ng X? Yung, 'di ba, ano yun eh, MX,
Philippine Next. Yes,
Philippine
MX.
Next. Kasi gendered ang Filipina, Latina,
Okay.
Filipino. Napag-usapan natin to years ago and
Yes.
gusto kong maparinig sa kanila ang iyong opinion.
Diyos me. Okay. Actually, napaaway pa ako dyan years ago. It was around September of 2020 during the pandemic. It so happens kasi that I took a linguistics class sa master's, no? Tinatawag ko siya elective but it's actually may penalty course kasi lumagpas na ako sa residency. So, when I took my historical linguistics class, ang dami kong mga assumptions sa language na na-clarify doon. And medyo nag-iba yung tono ko rin siguro, yung stance ko in terms of language issue. Ngayon, nagkaroon ng sort of debate dun sa isa kong post, yung regarding sa stand ko. Hindi naman ako ganun ka-grabing influencer, no, para sabihin na isa kong post, no. Pero siguro within my small circle sa academe, maliit lang na circle lang sa academe, nag-create siya ng ingay sa mga ano, sa amin, no, siguro sa maliit naming community. To the point na ipinablish pa ito, yung conversation sa Facebook ay ipinablish nung kausap ko sa isang radical news outlet online. Pwede niyo i-search, hindi ko napapangalanan. Pero mabuti siyang kaibigan, no. Pero hindi ko alam kung ano ba 'yon, kung No, hindi niya kasi ako sinabihan na ipa-publish niya pala yun, no? For whatever. Pero what I felt was that uh, hindi represented yung boses ko doon sa pagkaka-publish niya. Kasi parang na-skewed yung aking view. Kasi parang ang sinasabi niya doon sa kanyang ipinablish na version ay okay daw ako doon sa Philippinex at ang tingin ko daw sa Filipino ay kumbaga parang paano ba ang way of saying this? Kasi ang stand ko noon parang um, yung politika ng Filippinex, yung language ng X na yan at yung ano yung Latinx etc. Yan ay hinubog noong konteksto ng multicultural United States. Sa US yan nanganak di ba? At doon sa loob ng kanilang community, litaw yung gender inequality at yung pagiging pagkakaroon ng kumbaga othering sa kanila. So regardless kung yung Filipino as language, Filipino natin as culture ay gender inclusive or equal, no? Regardless sa konteksto natin dito sa Pilipinas. Pero pag dinala mo doon, iba yung dynamic. Yun yung sinasabi ko, no? Pero parang ang sinasabi tuloy ay parang basta nakalimutan ko yung exact way po paano niya na misrepresent yung sinasabi kong idea. Kumbaga ang akin lang, let's respect the actual material and political context ng mga Pilipino na nasa United States. Na respetuhin natin na kailangan nila yung X na Philippine X, yung MX no doon sa konteksto ng US kasi yun yung kondisyong konkreto na ginagalawan nila. Hindi na lang ito language issue. Hindi na lang ito semantics. Ito ay pragmatics na. Ano yung kailangan nila para mag-survive sa ganoong kondisyon? Yun yung ini-interrogate ko. Pero mukhang na-misread niya. Kasi parang ang sinasabi ko daw ay parang okay lang i-import yon yung ganong mga ideas. Pero hindi. No? Actually, medyo ko dyan, may parang parang pa rin nagkakabuki dance, parang nagchacha pa rin ako kung okay o hindi. Kasi produkto din ako ng sarili kong konteksto sa Pilipinas na pinalaki tayo ng Miss and Mister, di ba? No? At hindi talaga, bago talaga tong MX Pero siguro part siya ng ganong yung generational frustration natin na kasi dahil lumaki tayo, nakasanayan natin na hindi ginagamit itong MX kaya medyo may ganong anxiety. No, siguro paunti-unti pwede natin siyang i-incorporate. Ano? Kumbaga sa akin, it's an option. Hindi tayo dapat nag-exclude. It's an option. If you want to use MX, go. Ang alam ko nga nung in-announce yung graduation ko sa MA, MX ang ginamit nila sa amin. Though they were asking us in the email and I said, you can use Mr. Kasi komportable naman ako sa aking biological sex, no? Pero yan nga, they rather use the MX. So parang at that point, wait lang, hindi ko naman sinabi MX Pero okay na lang din. Okay naman din. Yun. So,
Thank you,
siguro
Gio.
sorry. Siguro rin, isa rin yun sa mga challenges din sa akin as a gender researcher, scholar, or I don't know, I don't want to use the word scholar, pero yun lumabas sa bibig ko. Pero parang siguro specialist na lang din, or researcher. Kasi scholar, masyadong mataas pa yun, malayo pang natin, itatry, no? Siguro isa rin yung challenge yung binanggit ko kanina, personal is political. Parang may ibang mga kasabayan ko or ibang nauna sa akin na they were using the MX and they're using the they pronoun when they refer to themselves. No, parang ino-own nila kung yung politics ko is nasa buhay ko. Ganun yung sinasabi nila. Kaya nila ginagamit yon. So siguro yun yung isang part ko then as a researcher na napapaisip ako na bakit hindi ko ginagawa yun, no? Baka yun lang, yung mga gano, parang reflexive mode lang kumbaga.
Thank you, Gio. Mind the context. Ayun yung isa sa mga lagi naming sinasabi, no? Sa pag nag-share kami or nagtitrain kami, nagbibigay kami ng workshop on sensitivity. Laging importante yung context. At tama ka, no? Ang konteksto nila sa US ay kailangan nila yon. Dito, gaya ng sabi mo, hindi pa masyado, pero kung sa tingin mo makakatulong, why not? Use MX or what? kung saan ka mas comfortable. Gio, ito ay second to the last question and
Penultimate, okay, sige.
actually, ito yung isa sa mga mas mainit na tanong. At least for me, basa ko. And importante siyang matanong. Yung gusto magtanong nito, syempre ayaw niya magpapangalan, ano.
Okay.
Torn siya kung tatanungin ba niya. Sabi ko, knowing Gio, gusto niyang i-discuss to. Kasi maiging ma-discuss to para malinawan tayo.
Mm. And I can say
Pwede.
no if I don't want to answer it, di ba? Pwede naman.
Of course, kung hindi ka
Oo.
comfortable, wala namang pilitan. Ito, I saw, binabasa ko yung pagkakaano niya. I saw a tweet from a proud transgender personality in the Philippines. She said that a transgender na babae ay ganap na babae. I'm just wondering why there is a need to still be identified as transgender if they want to be identified as quote-unquote ganap na babae. Why not remove it from the label if the goal is to be the opposite of your birth sex?
Mabigat yung tanong. Actually,
Yes.
it's a trans question pala, no? So, sobrang bigat nga niyan. No, actually, even within my circle of friends din, natatanong din ako, since ikaw naman na nag-gender sa atin, anong stand mo dyan? No? Parang ganun lagi no? So, di ba? Bigat, ang bigat. Kasi mahirap siya sagutin kasi number one, hindi ako trans. Okay? Mahirap magsalita for a community that you're not part of. No? Yung paggamit kasi nung categories, 'di ba? Linkis-linkis yung issue magkakaduktong kasi isipin na lang natin ganito, there are options. Pwede mong gamitin, pwedeng hindi. Parang sinasabi niya, kung gusto mong ma-acknowledge ka na trans woman as woman, bakit mo pa nilalagay yung trans? 'Di ba? Pwede mo naman tanggalin, di woman na lang siya, 'di ba? Para wala nang question, 'di ba? So parang yun yung sinasabi niya 'di ba? Bakit may kailangan pang kaduktong na trans dito sa umpisa? Di mas lalong naha-heighten yung othering nitong trans woman with the cis woman, 'di ba? Ang gusto nating ipakita dito kasi within the LGBT community or rather sa loob ng SOGI SE discourse, ang daming ang daming bifurcation, sanga-sanga. May tinatawag na binary, sa loob ng community may binary, di ba? Yung masculine, feminine, basta hinahati mo sa dalawa. Yung cis and trans is also a form of binary, di ba? Meron din tinatawag na non-binary. Hindi sila nagsusubscribe doon, yung mga genderqueer, agender, asexual, yung gender fluid, no? May mga member ng community na into this binary. May mga part ng community na not into this, na bino-blur yung binary. Kumbaga when you self-identify, let's say, as a trans woman, and I'm not sure kung lahat ng trans woman dito, but assuming, no, para ka na rin nagsusubscribe doon sa binary framework. Kasi you self-identify as a woman. So, anong counterpart nun? Di man. Diba? So, nare-retain yung ganong binary framework. So, what I'm saying is that hati-hati sa loob ng community. Diba? And that shows the diversity. Ngayon, bakit pa ginagamit yung label na trans? We want to embrace yung reality na hanggang ngayon nagpapatuloy yung discrimination. No? Na ngayon kailangan mo pa rin talagang gamitin, bitbitin yung kategorya ng trans or cis. You need to say it kasi nagpapatuloy yung actual concrete material na struggle na kapag hindi mo yun sinabi, ang ibibintang sa iyo, you are being deceitful. You're fooling me. Nandun yung naglilinkis pa din Though hindi yun yung intention, nagigets ko yung question na bakit mo kailangan idikit yung trans kung gusto mo ma-acknowledge ka as a woman. Pero kasi kapag hindi mo siya ginagamit ngayon, yun ang ibabato sa'yo with the current state of things. No? Nandiyan yung tinatawag nila na passing, yung may term sila, yung medyo transphobic na term, yung gusto mo lang parang mag-pass as a quote-unquote real woman. Di ba? Yung mga ganon, parang tumatawid o pumapasa. May mga ganong uri na pangbibintang. Which is actually quite emerging doon sa inong inaral ko yung etymology ng bakla. Kasi lumalabas na yung original category, yung original origin of meaning is not kasi ang current understanding pag sabing bakla, nanggaling siya sa salitang pagkaduwag, takot, kaya daw inaayawan yung word, kaya siya discriminatory, kaya siya stigma. Kasi pag tinawag kang bakla, ibig sabihin duwag ka. Pero archival sources show, no, na may earlier meaning ng salitang bakla. Way back in 1613, San Buenaventura Vocabulario de la Lengua Tagala. So, yan na, nag-archival na. Ang original meaning ng bakla ay mangloko, manlinlang, engañar. No? Manloko, to cheat, to fool, to trick. So, hindi na siya yung ginagamit na meaning ngayon ng salitang bakla na either or duwag, mahina, or nalilito, nababakla, or ngayon nga ay binabae, or ano, no? Ginagamit siya as an encompassing category for gay, queer, trans woman, no? Pero yung political weight nung earlier meaning ng bakla as panloloko, panlilinlang, kakabit pa rin siya eh. Kasi when we call someone as bakla, halimbawa, ang assumption, it's either you're a fake woman or unreal man. Hindi ka totoong lalaki, hindi ka talaga totoong babae. May ganoong essentialist notion. So, sa loob mismo ng discourse ng ng trans movement, actually issue 'yan kung dapat bang igamitin pa. Kung gusto nga talaga natin maging inclusive as women, bakit kailangan yung ilagay? Pero kasi part pa rin ng binabaka natin yung anino ng nakaraan na nagpapatuloy ngayon na may ganitong notion ng na kapag hindi mo siya nilagay, nanilin lang ka. Kailangan mo pa rin bakahin yun. Siguro yan, it takes years pa bago natin ma-achieve yung punto na hindi na natin kailangan gumamit ng cis at trans. Gaya ng mga ninuno natin. Hindi naman nila sila sabi, oy, cis woman to or trans woman ito. Pero nung panahon nila babae, ang tingin nila yung binabae sa mata ng mga kolonisador ay babae sa mata nila, no? Yung muherado o muheril, no, kung tawagin nila, ay babae sa panahon nila. Yun yung mga makikita natin. Kung possible siya in the past, bakit hindi natin siya magawa ngayon? Dahil merong mga obstacles sa structures of power na kailangan baliin at bakahin. Pag nabali natin yon, baka possible nating magawa muli, pero iba yung anyo. So, yun siya. Ano siya eh, politically necessary pa din and ethically necessary pa rin siguro. Pero for now, more than language, siguro ang kailangan natin baguhin is yung natin, yung acceptance natin ng yung kumbaga yung self-realization natin na trans women are women. Period. Pero kung nandiyan man yung trans o wala, yun siya. No? So, yun.
Thank you, Gio, sa magandang sagot, and thank you for clarifying that. That very sensitive issue, and maraming salamat, no? Mas naintindihan natin na until now, ito'y isang pakikibaka pa rin, no? Gaya ng maraming bagay, at importante ang paggamit ng salita para i-emphasize na until now, hindi pa tapos yung pakikibaka. Thank you, Gio. Final question, brother.
Okay. Sige.
Last words. Anong gusto mong ipabaon sa aming mga nakikinig sa'yo ngayon? I'm sure maganda ang maibabaon namin mula sa'yo.
Parang nakaka-challenge naman, last words. Last words. So parang this shouldn't be the last. Diba? Parang this should be an
for this
ongoing.
session.
Oo, I mean, yeah. Pero yun yung aking message siguro. This, medyo ironic, no? This shouldn't be the last. I mean, this shouldn't be the last discourse on this topic. This should be rather the beginning. Diba? Kung ano man yung kung meron man kayo natutunan or meron kayong something na nadala from this conversation, yung mga tanong ninyo from the audience, ang laking bagay yon. Actually, hindi naman, speaking as an academic, we really love being asked questions kasi that also help us to think and rethink yung mga assumptions namin. Kasi minsan, masyado na kami nakakahon sa academia, may curse of knowledge, hindi na namin nakikita yung realidad. When you throw the questions to us, ay, oo nga, no? Mapapaisip kami, and then, mas mabababa namin yung masyadong abstract. paano natin matutulungan ang lipunan, ang bayan? Paano natin ito mababalik sa bayan lahat? So, I think that's the message. Ipagpatuloy ito sa labas nitong webinar. Tayo mismo, baguhin natin yung ating mindset. Nasa mindset lang yan, mindset. And let's be the memer, no? Actually, ang dami na message kanina eh. Yung intergenerational, mag-interconnect tayo. Maging safe space tayo sa bawat isa. Let's be mindful and respectful, compassionate and empathic. Medyo parang motherhood statements, pero reality is sa sobrang competitive ng lipunan ngayon, minsan nakakalimutan na nating maging tao sa kapwa-tao. I think that's my final message. Let's humanize ourselves again and again.
Minsan
That's why we're studying
nakakalimutan
history.
natin,
Maging
minsan
tao.
nakakalimutan nating maging tao sa kapwa-tao.
Mm-mm.
Thank you very much, Gio. Sobrang ganda ng parting words mo. Before we end the Q&A, I would like to personally thank you for always sharing your knowledge, no. Ako rin para sa mga participants natin, si Gio ang ang go-to person ko kapag meron akong questions about gender and inclusion, no.
Yeah.
Since way back when,
Actually,
nung
sorry Jemay, naalala ko parang sa Asian Center, parang synonymous na yung pangalan ko sa gender nung panahon natin. Si Gio, gender yan. Parang ganon.
ikaw
Oo.
naman parating
Mm.
go-to guy at ikaw lang
Tsaka pag
ang
consultation ng thesis, parang alam ko na ita-topic mo. Parang ganon.
ikaw lang naman ang gustong tumuhog sa gender nung sa batch natin, and
O
we
hindi,
are proud
meron
of
ding iba. Meron ding iba. Marami naman tayo doon. Oo. Meron naman ding iba.
Ayun,
I-acknowledge natin. Oo.
yes. Gio, once again, thank you, and kailangan ko lang sabihin, Doc Dulce and Doc Cañete is, I'm sure, very proud of you.
Doc
Lalo si Doc
Dulce, Doc
Cañete.
Cañete, MCM, ang dami natin ding
CM, yes.
professors.
Na,
Oh,
nakikinig sila sa atin ngayon. Well,
oo.
si Doc Cañete. Gio, thank you very much, and let me turn over the session to Alex.
Hello.
Again,
Thank you so much, Jemai. Nice meeting you virtually. Thank you so much.
All right. So thank you, Sir Jem, Sir Gio, and to our audience. Before we finally end, I would like to invite Mr. Martin Romero, OIC Director of the Center of Inclusive Education, to present the Certificate of Appreciation to our guest speaker and a quick photo op. Take it away, Sir Martz.
So, all right. So this certificate of appreciation is presented to Mr. Gregorio Caliguia III for sharing his expertise at the Breakdown the Walls LGBTQ plus A community inclusion and safe spaces webinar on March 21, 2023. Signed Alexander Servidad, Project Head, Benilde. Signed Martin Romero, OIC Director, Center for Inclusive Education. And signed Nareen Oy, President, Best Buddies Benilde. Thank you, Gio.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you po.
Let's take a photo. Wait. Okay. Again. Take a photo. 1, 2, 3. Okay. All right. Thank you, Gio.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Well, diretso na ako, no, to our closing remarks. First of all, I would like to thank everyone who attended the second the event on the second day of the Inclusion Week 2023. Again, the topic is very interesting. Marami kong natutunan. So with that, Sir Gio, maraming salamat for being here again, for accepting our invitation and for giving us a really good insight about the topic. I'll just make this quick. But before that, I would like to thank the organizers, Sir Gemma, Alex, Renzel, V, Robbie, and GM. Maraming salamat, no, for fixing this event, for organizing this event. to Miss Lani as well, Miss Camille and Sir Cliff from the CIE team. Of course, the interpreters, maraming salamat po for being here. As always, no, thank you for making our event very inclusive and accessible to our deaf partners. Then, of course, to the participant, again, maraming salamat po for being here, for staying, for listening, and for asking questions. We had a lot of questions that was asked by Sir Jem, and ganda ng discussion about it. I do hope you learned a lot from it. Siguro highlight ko na lang yung mention ni Sir Gio, no. I believe honestly, I believe in the idea of madali for us to judge positively and negatively, no? If we're not familiar with certain situations, certain population, no? It's really good for us to educate ourselves about everything, about the things that we're not comfortable, about the things that are controversial, because it gives us more, I guess, idea, resources to, I guess, decide kung ano ba talaga, kung are we going to include these people, are we going to exclude this people, and something like that. So I guess itong opportunity, hopefully marami kayo natutunan. Because again, it's really important for us to learn about things na we're not really comfortable. Like like mentioned ni Sir G and Sir Jamay kanina, lumaki, siguro most of us here, lumaki tayo sa different generation, and this yung generation, and mostly hindi ganun ka-accepting dun sa population. And it's good that we're already talking about this topic. And hopefully, this won't be the last time we'll be talking about this topic. But hopefully, and I'm hopeful rather, that this will be the start of you being more open about this topic. It's okay, siguro, if you're not yet, there, that accepting, but I do hope that through this webinar that was discussed by Sir Gio, and through the discussion with Sir Gemay, mas nagiging open tayo, and mas nagiging neutral tayo when it comes to this very sensitive and this very sensitive topic. Yun lang naman. Again, maraming salamat. Plug ko na lang din yung mga next set of events for this week's Inclusion Week. Tomorrow, we'll be having a Deaf Awareness Seminar. So if you guys want to still join the event, open for registration, you just go to the Facebook page of Best Buddies Benilde. We have the registration link there. It'll be from 10 a.m. to 12 noon. So Zoom lang naman siya, so you don't have to be in Benilde, so that's okay. Just register, and we'll give you the link after. Then at 12 noon tomorrow as well, we'll be having a mass. We're sponsoring a mass in the TAF campus. Sadly, we had to move the mass from the Shrimp campus to the TAF campus. So if you guys are free around 12:10, feel free to join us in the TAF campus chapel. Then on Thursday, we'll be having two events. Sorry, before I go to the Thursday event, we'll be live streaming the event of the finals of the Valorant event. So if you guys are gamers here, if you wanna see some action-packed Valorant game, we'll be streaming the finals tomorrow. We'll just announce what time, but definitely gabi pa siya. So there. Then on Thursday morning, we'll be having the End Our Word. Just to give a little background about the campaign, it's the ending the our word. Sorry for the term, but it's yung retarded the word, where it's a campaign to end that word and any other derogatory terms. So if you guys are free, again, it's via Zoom lang. Just go to our page for the registration link. Then in the afternoon of Thursday, we'll be having a first aid training in B303. So that's in Benilde Hall, room 303 in the TAF campus. So if you guys want to learn how to help people who are experiencing seizures, if you want to know more how to, if let's say walang may alam on how to handle them, it's a good chance for you guys to learn from this workshop. So we'll be having EMTs from the clinic of Benilde, and they'll be teaching us how to at least be there for someone who is having attack, and give us the first aid training. Then lastly, on Friday at 12 noon, we'll be having a tune-in music therapy with the AB music production faculty. So if you want to use music to help you with your mental health, we'd like to invite you to this event. So it'll be happening again at 12 noon at A612. So that's one of the classrooms in the music production department, and in A309. So that's the CIE camp. So we have two venues, but we'll see the division, but at least we have two venues for that one. And lastly, to close the events of Inclusion Week, we'll be having a mini concert slash closing. It'll be happening at 4 p.m. on Friday. It'll be at the DAC cafeteria. So it's a free event. We have food there if ever. So hopefully you can guys drop by if you're in Benilde on Friday. So yun lang naman. Again, maraming salamat. And back to you, Alex.
All right. So thank you, Sir Mars, for your warm closing remarks. Before we formally close this program, we would like to take a couple of minutes of your time to please answer our feedback form. Kindly scan the QR code flashed on your screen or click the link sent via the chat box. This will only take a few minutes of your time, so please do answer them. This will really help us to evaluate our event. So yeah. Okay, so once again, we would like to thank Sir Gio for his meaningful discussions and inspiring messages for our participants. We would also like to thank the Center for Inclusive Education, Office of the Vice President for Lasallian Mission and Student Life, and Best Buddies Benilde for making this webinar possible. Let's all give them a virtual round of applause. We would also like to acknowledge our FSL interpreters, Ms. Liz Ballesteros, Mr. Jefferson Cortez, and Mr. Jefferson Umali, and the team behind this event. And of course, to our dear audience, we would like to express our sincerest appreciation and gratitude for your patience, understanding, and ultimately for making time to join us this afternoon. For the last time, this has been Alex, your host for today's webinar. Thank you so much and have a wonderful evening. Stay safe always and enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Thank you, everyone. You may now leave the meeting.